Hi, Mark.
I'm going to read the, yes, good enough. I'm getting caught in the storm with the cold. Where's Jim? Don? Good. Is enough room? Is there enough room? We're one seat short. One seat short.
David?
We have, Dale? Hello and welcome. This is the Town Council School Committee joint work session with the local legislators. The date is Monday, May 17th. The time is approximately 7:15. And can you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to just ask for everybody, to, instead of doing a roll call here, but just to everybody go around, because it has been mentioned before that we're not, people aren't sure who everybody is. So we can start at the end. We'll just say our names.
Jim O'Neill, South Kingstown Town Council.
Carol Hagan McEntee, South Kingstown Town Council.
Kathy Fogarty, South Kingstown Town Council.
Mary Eddy, South Kingstown Town Council.
Ella Whaley, South Kingstown Town Council.
Donna, flip on your switch. Sorry, Donna. Everybody pull your mics. Switch
All right, Donna Walsh, District 36, Block Island, part of South Kingston, Charleston, and a little bit of Westerly.
Sue Sosnowski, State Senator representing South Kingstown and Block Island.
Mike Rice, House of Representatives, South Kingstown.
David Caprio, State Representative for South Kingstown and Narragansett.
Scott Miller, South Kingstown School Committee.
Liz Morris, South Kingstown School Committee.
Fred Frostig, South Kingstown School Committee.
Kevin Jackson, South Kingstown School Committee.
Don Lally, State Rep, South Kingstown, Narragansett, and North Kingstown.
John Richard, South Kingstown School Department.
Kristen Stringfellow, Superintendent.
Alan Lord, Finance Director, Town of South Kingston.
Steve Alford, Town Manager, South Kingstown.
All right, thank you. And before we get going, I just want to read the rules under the Town Rules of Conduct 2008-2010 term. Rule number 2A, a work session is a meeting of the Town Council that may include other officials, bodies, agencies, or groups. The primary purpose of a work session is to obtain information and exchange ideas rather than take formal action. Consequently, work sessions are open to the public, but public participation is at the discretion of the Town Council. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Next, we are going to have discussion, and we're going to talk about a very exciting topic that's on everybody's mind here, the education funding formula. So, I think last week Yes, last week, the town council unanimously approved a resolution that was sent up to upstate, to Providence. Mr. Alford could probably talk a little bit more since he testified on the funding formula just this past Thursday afternoon. So, Steve, there's also a school committee resolution that also was went through the town council chambers too. Steve?
Packets have been left out at the seats of council, school committee, and legislators. If anybody doesn't have it, we can make sure you get a copy. The council resolution was the first item, and in fact, the school committee's resolution is near identical. The major concerns that the town has at this point is that in its current form, the proposed funding formula would reduce by over $3.8 million the funding over an 8-year period to the town of South Kingstown school system. I've spent with the finance director an extensive amount of time in reviewing the formula, the implications, and assisted the council in the development of their resolution. Rather than going through it point by point, I think that there's really a couple of key issues that need to be understood by all. The funding formula really is a two-pronged affair. One is it establishes a core education cost. The commissioner's proposal is at $82.95, and that's to be multiplied times the number of children that are in the school system. The formula also calls for a student success factor, and that student success factor is based on the number of students between pre-K and grade 12 that are eligible for free or reduced program lunch. And that's worth, for each of those students, another $3,318. Maybe the easiest way of following is that I've given you some brightly colored sheets right after the council's resolution. And the first document says the calculated with median family income. And I want to just walk everybody through what the implications of this formula are. What I've done is to provide a summary of 8 different communities as a cross-section of the state, and how the funding formula as it deals with assessed value plays out. And if you start, and we use South Kingstown as the column of reference, on December 31st of 2006, the tax assessor certified the tax roll at $5,323 million. The state determined that our roll was at 93.6% of 100% value. So what the state did is they then increased the certified tax roll by the amount to get it equal to 100%. So it went from the 5.3 up to $5.6 million. They then, based on a formula that was first started 50 years ago, trended back all of the cities and towns' assessment values to what the original certified roll values were. So then they took 7.93% off. And you can see going across, whether it's Providence, Pawtucket, Barrington, everybody is discounted. That's the equalization factor by 7.93%. So we ended up with what's an equalized weighted assessed value of $5.23 million. What the state then did is they took the median family income for South Kingstown, which was 128.67% of the state average, and they factored our equalized weighted value by an additional 28.67%. In the case of Providence, where Providence was only 39.26% of the state median family income, they discounted their taxable roll by 60%. What you end up with then is a non-equalized weighted adjusted value. That then gets trended back to what the original rolls that were certified by the 39 cities and towns. So when we get done, everybody gets factored down by 6.6%. So South Kingstown ends up with what the state calls an adjusted, equalized, weighted average value. So South Kingstown ends up where it started out with a $5.3 million roll, but because we've got a high median family income, they said our taxing capacity based on income should be considered at $6,294,000,000. So what they did is, on paper, they've adjusted our roll value by $1 billion. In the case of Providence, because their median family income was at 40% of the state average, they discounted their roll by $6.2 billion. And as you can see, Pawtucket was down 1.6, Barrington was up 1.6 like us, and so forth. Then that provides us with the adjusted equalized value. They don't stop there. There's a double proxy value for poverty. One of the weighted values is dealing with the median family income. The second is the second set of factors that the state incorporates, which is looking at the PK through 6 lunch program eligibility. If you go down the column, you'll see that we had 352 students out of the 1,954 in the system, or 18% of our student body was eligible. What the state, and if you look at Providence, Providence had 88%. So in addition to them being discounted $6.2 billion in taxable property based on the median family income, they're then getting 88% of the student, and that's multiplied across. When you get done, and I won't bore you with the square root and the, what we end up with is that it says that South Kingstown would be entitled to 17.3% of what the state core education costs are. Providence, 85%, Pawtucket, 77%, Barrington, 20%. I ask you to go over the last two columns with Newport and Narragansett. Because their roll values would have meant that they owed money to the state, what the state did is they put them in at 0. So the only factor that was used in the Newport and Narragansett on this sheet that was considered was the second poverty factor, which was the PK through 6. So while there's supposed to be a median taken of two different values, one of the values for those, actually there's 6 communities statewide, are set at 0. So the formula really doesn't treat every school district in the same manner. And in fact, it adjusts based on both median family income and poverty factors. If you go to the second page of that handout, what I did is I looked at what would the value be to South Kingstown if the median family income wasn't used. And we just took the equalized weighted assessed value without that influence of the 28%. And we would go from a 17.3% share up to 25.1%. The last box that's on that page, really I tried to capsulize what is this formula doing. And again, the first line shows you what the core cost of education is. 3,609 children multiplied times 82.95 gives you the 29.9 million. 606 students that are PK through, and that should be PK through 12, at $3,318. That's that 40% factor. Gives you another $2 million. So what the state's saying is core education cost in South Kingstown would be $31.9 million, of which the state should only pay 17.3%. That's how we lose the $3.8 million. If we went at the 25%, instead of losing the $3.8 million, we would be losing about $1.3 million. The reason I went through this level of detail is to really explain that a formula can be built in a number of different ways. Some states use weighting factors that look at median family income, some look at median household income, some take a blended rate of different incomes. Everybody can do it in a different manner. And as you can see, just changing one variable on the formula that the state put out can mean the difference of almost $2.5 million. When I assisted the council in the development of their package, we also had some concerns, because when we looked at the core education costs in Rhode Island, the actual cost was $82.95 in 2008, yet in 2008 it was $8,453, or $158 more than what they're forecasting for 3 years from when that actual cost was incurred. I think one of the reasons that the core education cost came in at $82.95 is because when you back into the number of students statewide, it comes out to the same $715 million that would be distributed under the aid formula, rather than truly being a measure of what core education costs will be. And I'd also caution that core education costs exclude transportation costs. Suburban communities, particularly large land area communities like South Kingstown, have major costs associated with transportation that are looked at as being a, quote, local cost. All of these different things are concerns because there really has been no vetting of the formula that's been proposed by the commissioner. And in fact, to a certain extent, I think it's been a disservice statewide to put out one funding formula proposal with one economic presentation as to who wins and who loses, because now the people that were going to win $15 million, if there's an adjustment made by the General Assembly, it looks like they've lost money from what had been proposed, rather than there being a more adequate distribution of the dollars. Other concerns that we had is that in the weighting that was used for the student success ratio, this is the 40% of the core, their numbers were lower than what they are are higher than what they are in Connecticut and Massachusetts, yet the core costs in those states are higher. So it just seems to be a reverse of what we're seeing in other states, and more of a loss to the suburban communities and more money going into the urban areas. We're also concerned as far as the reference year. When you consider the fact that they're anticipating using a December 31 of 2006 tax roll, that was the last time we had revaluation in South Kingstown. Again, we started out at about $5.3 billion. To give you an idea, the roll is down $890 million on the reval that we've just done that we'll be using to tax people in the 10-11 year. Now, could the state bring the standard up to be the current year assessment roll? Not if they're using the same equalization process that they're planning on here, but potentially you're using a roll that's 4 years old. You're using a median family income value that's 10 years old, and you're using school enrollment numbers, which are going to be May of 2010. It seems as if every component of the formula works to the disadvantage of South Kingstown, or more particularly the suburban communities. I think that there needs to be a serious review made and cost estimates prepared on each of the different variations to try to come up with what is a fair and equitable distribution. It was interesting, at the meeting on Thursday of last week, when the House Finance Committee reviewed this, the opening statement by the chair was that what they needed to do was to determine what the best way was to measure property values, community wealth, and special need weights in the distribution of that $715 million. I dare say that if that was what the intent of the hearing was, and there was only one proposal on the table, let me back up, there was 3 proposals on the table, but one that was really submitted by the House Chair for Finance, it didn't seem as if there was enough balance being provided in terms of how that was going to work. I bring all these points forward along with the other concerns in the resolution so that our local legislators are aware of it. I think the council's heard me ad nauseum on these issues. Two other points I wanted to raise for you is that in addition to the formula, something that hasn't been talked about yet is the impact that it's going to have on charter school tuitions. In South Kingstown, we're anticipating 103, I believe, students that will be in charter schools. When we prepared the school budget was told to prepare based on the governor's budget for 2011. Well, obviously, at that time, we were anticipating that there'd be a 5.5% increase associated with tuition for charter school students. If the formula goes into effect, not a component of the formula, but as a subset of the formula, is a requirement that the actual amount of money that the that the town of South Kingstown provides, which is $47,909,000 in property taxes, is to be divided by the number of students in our school system, inclusive of the charter schools. That works out to $13,401. We've budgeted the students at
$1,108,000.
So we're looking at a potential of net of the buses that they would have to pay for themselves, $122,000 increase there. We've also got 8 kids in the Met School, of which we don't pay at this point. So we'll see an additional bill of $13,104 times those 8 children. That works out to another $107,000. These are all things that aren't considered with the formula runs that have been provided to the public at this point. Hopefully, the converse to this is that we would get $375,000 in group home aid, which wasn't a part of the governor's budget. That'll offset some of the loss that's anticipated. But all of these things are cost drivers to the community. It's too much, too soon, and if we're going to blow up the system on how we distribute education aid, it seems that the equalization process that's used in the state needs serious consideration. One of the things that we point out in the resolution is that there was a report prepared in 2001 that's been coined the ALMI report, and it was done for the Department of Administration Division of Revenue. And what it did was it looked at the equalization process used in the state of Rhode Island, and it was highly critical of the methodology that was employed. Most of the criticism was because they were factoring median family income onto an equalized assessed rate. And what the ALMI report clearly said was that by doing that, you're getting away from what the true market value is of property taxes in the community, and you're trying to influence it based on income. That's exactly what the formula I just walked you through does. One of the other things that was recommended in the ALMI report is a series of, I think, 8 recommendations on how they should be bringing their process up to really a 21st century standard. Several of those recommendations we believe have not yet been implemented. One of the key things is that in urban areas, there's very little sales data for commercial and urban property. A lot of the industrial property doesn't change hands often. So the stated values of what the roles are in the urban areas may be more in challenge than in a community like South Kingstown, where 90% of the property is residential and you've got enough sales for a statistically valid sample. All of those things were brought up 10 years ago. One of the other things that the ALMI report indicated was the reason median family income was being used was because that system was put into effect before income tax went in the state of Rhode Island, which took place in 1974. I believe that formula goes back to well into the mid-1960s. So before you jump on a formula that works on an equalization process that has your property tax values reduced if you live in an urban area, and your property tax values restated if you live in a suburban area as a higher increase, and use that as the way you're going to distribute education aid in perpetuity, you really need to take a look at the system itself and ask the questions. The weighted factors in some states It's not just the PK through 6 that are on eligible lunch programs. Some look at the special ed needs. Some look at vocational and tech school needs. Some look at English as a second language. All of those different weighting factors can be used. And in fact, one of the bills that was up for hearing did have different weighting factors. Each of them has pluses and minuses. But for us to just simply deal with one formula, rather than looking at what the benefits or drawbacks are of the others, I think creates a great deal of difficulty for us. And again, I'm not sure how you can institute this type of a formula change that would have, in our case, a $468,000 loss next year, coupled with the charter school loss of the $122,000, coupled with the $107,000 loss on the vocational schools, and assume that the school department is going to be able to deal with that in one fell swoop. And assume that that 468 is going to be there every year for the next 8 years. How do we maintain the educational quality in our programs if we're going to see that type of a abandonment of the state responsibility toward the education cost? We're certainly willing to assist in terms of understanding and working with the formula, but if this is just going to go through and become a part of law before the end of June, I think many school systems are going to be substantially and adversely impacted. I'd be glad to answer any questions on this. I'd also be willing to meet with any of the legislators that want to go over it in more detail, because this is probably the most critical issue that's going to face the General Assembly and face the cities and towns for this year or the following year. I don't know what more I can do to try to facilitate greater discussion, but I stand ready to assist you any way I can.
Sue? Yeah, I was going to say, Danny. No, that's fine. That's fine. I saw your hand going up, so if anybody has any questions, Sue, if you'd like to be first,
Sure.
by all means.
Steve, thank you. I just had a question on the figures the last figures you gave us was 468,000 lost to South Kingstown, 122.
Can't hear you, Sue.
I'm sorry. I was just asking Steve for the repeat on the figures. You said the $468,000 lost to South Kingstown, $122,000 loss with a charter school, and the VOTEC, I didn't get that figure.
Met school.
107 to the Met School.
Let me also go on with that list. Because they're going to use the May of 2010 enrollment numbers, there's a potential for 100 student loss. If you have 100 less students, then what we're looking at is the potential loss of an additional $247,000. Because when you take the 468 or 1/8 of the total 3.8 million, it works out that the state would be giving us around $2,460 per student under that formula. If we lost 100 students, we'd lose the $247,000. So when you put all of that on the table, as well as when the school committee put their budget together, they worked off of the governor's budget that included $458,000 in savings based on pension reform. So if you got the formula at the 468, you got the governor retirement at 458, you got the charter school at 122, you got the loss of students at 247, hopefully a credit on that of 375 on the group home. It's about $1,027,000 plus or minus. If that group home aid were lost, it would be up at $1.4 million. And all of this is centered on, other than the governor's retirement proposal, all of this is focused right through that formula as it was presented by the commissioner.
Okay, Donna? Oh, no, Sue, do you have another question? Follow up?
I was just going to follow up. I just wanted to let everyone know that a Senate version, S2770, will be heard tomorrow in Senate Finance Committee, the Senate school funding formula. So you're all welcome to attend that also.
What time would that be at?
That's at 3 p.m.
3.
That's a different bill.
It's at 3 o'clock
It's
tomorrow?
not the commissioner's bill.
The commission,
I did bring a copy of the bill. I didn't know if we wanted to go over it tonight. It is S2770. It is substantially different. It does have a different weighting formula in it. And it talks about, I guess the bottom line is, we could go through all the data in there, but it says unless there is an increase in revenue, it would not, this formula would not kick in. If there wasn't enough money to change the system, it wouldn't kick in until there is an adequate.
that's the one with the 2 years of increased state revenue. So that would be the one that the School Committee Association had been a sponsor of?
Yes.
Is there also a hold harmless in there for all communities?
This is the latest one, and there was a hold harmless.
Yeah, that's the bill that would cost another I think it was $350 million more than the $715 million that was available in the current year.
It's no better. But I will be forwarding both the school committee's resolution and yours, but by all means, anyone who wants to participate, we'd love to have you at the Senate Finance Committee meeting.
So who are the sponsors?
That's Senator Gallo, Piva Weed, Ruggiero, De Palma, Felag. I'm also on it too. I think just about everyone in the Senate co-sponsored it. Donna?
Okay, Donna, go ahead.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry.
There are 3 bills out there, and the one of them, I guess, is in the House is sponsored by Corvasi, and that one has a hold harmless provision in it.
It's quite similar to this one.
I haven't read that one, but I know that the Corvasi one does too, so they probably are pretty much the same. I'm not positive. Then there's the Agello bill, and then there's the Commissioner's bill. So there's 3, and I think what I heard was that we're going to have to come together on these bills. And that's what I read in the paper. This was the chairman, the finance chair's statement about this, that somehow we would do something about these bills together. I don't know how.
Bill we'd lose everything.
Yeah, on the Agello bill, yes.
It's not acceptable.
That isn't acceptable at all. But my other question, the question I had for you, Steve, is, am I right, are you meeting with the commissioner this week on Wednesday?
The
Oh,
council
okay.
is meeting with the commissioner on Wednesday.
Well, that seems like a wonderful opportunity to share this information. Have you had an opportunity to share that with the commissioner so far?
She sat through Thursday's meeting with the House Finance Committee, so I think she's aware of it. I've also, at her office's request, submitted the documentation. So yes, she's certainly familiar with what my concerns are.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Don?
At this point of the House session, it's so late in the year for us to make such a drastic change.
I'm with you, Don.
Could you live with level funding from last year?
Level funding last year, that'd be,
That's an increase over what was proposed.
How much is the governor's proposed?
They were down 3.8%. But the governor's was confusing because he was down 3.8%, but he was also assuming he was going to reduce their cost by $458,000 on pension reform, which doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So I think that if the governor's budget went through without the pension reform, the school committee would still be looking for about $458,000. Certainly that's a far cry from the million plus that the formula would put on the table.
Just because the formula seems to be, I mean, you've raised some legitimate concerns as far as what you should count, what you shouldn't count. I looked at it, and I counted reps. It looked like it was almost politically motivated so that they had enough votes for the haves to outweigh the have-nots. And we usually don't like to split towns and cities that way. So I know I spoke to Representative Caprio, Rice, and Walsh, and whatever we would come together with, we're going to try to hold it off till next fiscal year, not this year. And then what we'll do is see how much money we can retain in the budget for you this year as compared to last year. I don't know whether or not we're gonna go forward with the pension reform. Right now, everything's on the table. The budget seems to be it's rumored it's gonna be coming out the first week of June, and it'll include the supplemental one in it. So that's about the time period we're looking at. Whether or not that helps you by having a budget come out the first week of June so you can meet and come up with your budget prior to July 1st. I know it's cutting it close, but we are trying to come out with one the first week of June.
Alan?
Sue, one question, and probably it would be the same for you, Don. As far as, it would appear to me that the funding formula is all geared to the race to the top and trying to get that money. So what impact, if you were to delay it based on the state having the money to pay for it, would that influence the race to the top?
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. You don't think so? Representative Caprio seems to have a difference of opinion.
The commissioner was asked that question at the Finance Committee meeting the other day. Actually, Steve, we were both there prior to when I was there. But I met up with some of the House Finance staff earlier this afternoon, and they gave me a bunch of the data. I handed out a packet to everybody. Everybody should have one of these. And I asked that question to Ms. Sharon Ferlin, who's the chief financial advisor there. And her opinion was that, she apparently had confirmed it with Commissioner Gist, that Commissioner Gist misunderstood the question. I think afterwards she had said that she thought the question meant if there wasn't a formula. But if a formula is passed, and this was again according to the staff today, if the formula was passed but not implemented, it would not have an adverse effect on the race to the top, which is a significant difference. And I mean, rest assured, we're all at the State House, and this year actually much later than other years, into the night. And the primary concern of all of us is this funding formula for South Kingstown. There's no magic bullets, to solve a lot of the financial issues that we have. Thankfully, some of the at the revenue estimating conference, the needle has started to move in the right direction. But we still face about a $170 million deficit for the current year and about a $360 million for 11. And this school funding formula is now presented in the middle of that environment, where there's always the temptation to try to save money through that also. So, we get it. We know this is an important issue. And as Don just said, we've all been discussing this, and we would think it would be a very fair outcome, no matter what the formula is, because there's a lot of concerns, Steve, that you've presented, not only at the committee meeting the other day, but hopefully when the commissioner is here on Wednesday, she'll have an opportunity to respond directly to the people about your concerns and maybe what the rationale was to use the formula the way it's presented. But we want to make sure that South Kingston has enough money to provide the type of education that the residents here want for their children. It was a great showing this morning with the Walk to School Day, which was, I understand, a national event, but there was some other symbolism there too to keep the school open. I went there, I talked to a lot of the parents, I still have a t-shirt on, but to see the result of what that school has in those children was very moving. And we want to try to provide enough money so that not only that school can remain open, at least through next year, so that when you renegotiate the contract, there will be some hard numbers in front of you so that you know what you will then need at that point to try to maintain the school open. It almost makes you wonder if that wasn't in play right now, if there wasn't this urgency about closing the school, how much focus would be on this formula. But it is, and certainly it's on the forefront, at least I speak for myself and I believe everybody, on the forefront of all of our minds.
It's very important to all of us in this town. It's not just even with the school, it's for it's going to affect all the schools and the quality of education
Certainly.
in this town. So it's been foremost on our mind. I think I've called pretty much most of you and talked to most of you about this over the past several months since we started the whole budget process about our concern, and this really picked up and got legs. much quicker than we had thought it would, you know. So yes, it is important, and we will have Commissioner Gist here on Wednesday, and she'll have a one-on-one focus. I know she's been to other communities, but I don't think she's going to be to a community that has the numbers as well prepared as Mr. Alfred has done. I think he worked on this pretty much all weekend long, adding on some of the other communities to show the ratios. So I see cracks in her formula here, and I think she's going to realize that maybe that delay might be something that they might want to do. Or, you know, if you can work amongst your colleagues, that would certainly be helpful.
I mean,
the
if you
implementation
know,
to push off.
we're in the economic climate that, you know, the whole world has been impacted, and it trickles all the way down to our local city and town governments. And we're trying to react now, not only on a statewide level, but every city and town, to budgets and expenditures and taxing abilities that have grown over the years. And there's always, again, the temptation to compare communities, as Steve did so effectively in his chart. But if you look at, you know, you always try to compare your community to other communities, and how come that community is getting more and we're getting less, and what are the factors? But, you know, you kind of have to look at the starting point also. You know, other communities of similar size and of similar, you know, suburban localities have much different starting points, and that's why, you know, I think some of them might be, like, Barrington's always the example that sticks out, and I hear it mentioned at the meetings. You know, how can a community like Barrington actually increase money? Well, if you look at where the starting point is, South Kingston, you know, it's a similar size community, similar number of students, as far as that goes. South Kingston receives about $9 million of school aid, where Barrington is only at about $1.5 million. You know, and South Kingston total school budget, you know, is in the $60 million range, where Barrington's in the $40 million range. And, you know, the cost per student is vastly different. So when you try to apply a formula that's going to treat like communities equally, and if you take those two starting points, they have to meet somewhere in the middle. Because South Kingston over the years has received, you know, drastically more than a community like Barrington, multiple times more, based on those numbers. So, you know, it's not necessarily where we end, but it's also, you know, where we start. You know, South Kingston is getting, you know, close to that $9 million figure, where Barrington is getting less. So I just, you know, try to look at the global picture a little more than just trying to pin one community against other communities.
Jim?
Yeah, can the second application, Race to the Top, be forwarded to Washington without some kind of an EFF agreement? What's the time play here? How much time does she have left with her second application? And can the General Assembly put something together within that time frame?
Well, I think the application goes in next week, but the actual interviews don't go on until August. And they have so when they present actually present the application, by that time our legislative session would be over, and if there is a formula at that time.
All right, so there can be a catch-up from the General Assembly.
I believe that they modify, and sometimes it happens with, I'm not sure what the labor organization signing on or not, and there's been some, apparently there are big things in Central Falls that may change.
So we are going to see some kind of a formula come through. Well, and it'll have to be adjusted for the current year budget, or can that be pushed forward to the next year budget, yet here she is with her application in place? So I'm not quite sure of who's on first here, where we're connecting the dots.
Jim, I don't know if there's an answer, as we sit here today, to that question, whether there first is going to be a formula. The leaders have indicated that it was a priority to put a formula in place this year, and those hearings are going on, you know, have been going on now for some time, and are continuing to go on. And when it's going to be implemented is not a certainty as we sit here, if there indeed is a formula.
Okay.
As we sit here tonight.
All right, and just a second question for
Go
Steve,
ahead,
if I may, Kathy.
Sure.
Steve, and I'm sorry I didn't bring my newspaper article. If I remember correctly, 12 or 13 communities look to lose in the EFF about $36 million, if I remember adding that up correctly in the newspaper. And out of the 150,000 kids in the state, let's say 100,000 belong to those other 27, 28 school districts. I mean, we're coming down to $300, $400 per kid. I mean, this is hardly even scratching the surface of how we're ever going to bring middle-class school values to poor neighborhoods. I mean, that's meaningless sum of money. Absolutely meaningless in the world of things, and especially when our state, apparently $2 billion divided by roughly 150,000 kids, we're one of the highest in the lands for the amount of money that we're spent on schools. So what am I missing here?
Well, I think that you're only dealing here with what the core education costs are. You're not dealing with any of the things that are excluded, which would be, you know, OPEB requirements, retirement costs, transportation costs. You know, again, the only thing you're dealing with here is the 8295 that's been set up, factored at, if it's at 17.3%, that $1,500. I think if your question is the cost of education in Rhode Island abnormally high in relation to what the national numbers would be, the answer would be yes. And a lot of it is because you got 80% of it driven by labor and benefit costs, which are extremely high in Rhode Island. But you're not going to solve that problem with the formula. I mean, that problem is outside of the formula in terms of driving. If you're talking about driving down the basic costs of education, it would have to be looking at the labor distribution.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that, but $300 to $400 per student for those poor communities, that's, I mean, to go through this exercise is just nuts. Just not enough money there. There just isn't. $36 million. It's
one of the other sheets I included with after the two spreadsheets was a sheet that the commissioner had given out, and this sheet shows what the core costs are in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and what's proposed in Rhode Island. And as you can see, Connecticut was up at 96.87, Massachusetts 96.59, and New Hampshire is very low. And they had suggested Rhode Island would be at the 82.95. And again, remember, as I say, that 82.95 would be for the 10-11 year, where in the 08 year, the last year that they had insight numbers on, it was over 8,400 that they'd already spent. One of the other things that's interesting here is that when you look at the weight that they provided for that 40% factor, in Rhode Island it's going to be $3,318. When you look at some of the other states, they're relatively low on the weighted value, yet we're higher on the weighted value and low on the core costs, which obviously has adverse impact on a suburban community. The other thing that they're doing in Rhode Island is that they're looking at extraordinary costs or extraordinary costs as 5 times what the foundation amount is. So that would put it at around, I think about $60,000, so that any child that costs more than that, the state would pick up the cost. But it was a minimal dollar amount because it was such a high number that was being used. When you look at some of the other states, it's a factor of 3.75 or 4.0. I'm less concerned with the core costs and the weighted costs here than I am with what the percentages are based on the equalization study. Because if you're only getting 17% of $10,000, it's not much more than 17.5% of the 8,200. The key is whether you use the equalization process that's in place now with the median family income, or whether or not you go back and you say we should be separating the two. We should be dealing just with what the adjusted equalized weighted value of the community is, and we when we do equalization, and then provide the weighting factors that are necessary for poverty or special needs. And that's not what's been proposed here. Here you got the double weight. You got the weight here of the 40% in how you figure out what your core education costs are, and then on top of that, you've got the free or reduced lunch program for the K through 6. And again, we're at 18% of our population, where the urban areas are plus 80%. Multiply those numbers out, and that's why you see such a major redistribution of the funds. One of the things I would mention is that in the 90s, we were receiving a percentage share of what we spent. At that point, with the growing enrollments that we had, we were seeing the money increase. Places like Barrington really didn't see the stabilization. Barrington's actually seen a population increase in their schools over the last 10 years, where we've seen a decline. So, different communities are at different levels of funding. Were we being underfunded in the 90s and overfunded from 2000 plus? Possibly so, but only if you use the formula that's been devised here rather than, because that was one of the points that I made, is that people keep talking about communities that are overfunded. And I said, with all due respect, you're only overfunded if you use the formula that's before you. And that needs to be be considered as we go forward, because even if we looked at the 25% share without the median family income being included in it, you're only down 1.3 million over an 8-year period.
Yeah, Alan?
Yeah, and the other piece on that is that the equalized assessed value as far as the percentage for South Kingston over that same period has increased dramatically more than what the statewide average has. So that also skews the, at one point in time back in the 90s, yes, we were getting what our fair share was. But as that equalized value has increased, obviously that has hurt us.
I think a major concern also and a good argument to hold off the implementation is what you brought up, not only tonight, Steve, but also at the Finance Committee meeting last week, is the receipt of the census data coming in the near term, so that we will have more current information to use and to apply to it in those areas where that would apply. So, I mean, we've spoken about this, and I know you said even with the governor's numbers, it would be a much better result than if the numbers from the formula were used.
Yeah,
especially with regard to being able to keep the schools open and whatnot, at least for the next year until the contract comes up, and then those issues could be addressed. So we do have several things we can talk about, not only at the State House, but also on Wednesday when Commissioner Gist comes in. A lot of these very technical concerns and high-level mathematics that we're all talking about here. We can't speak for why she chose to do it the way she did and why the formula was created in that way, but yourselves and the public will have an opportunity on Wednesday to ask her. He agreed to come down at all of our requests, so we do appreciate that.
I do want to be fair. Whether we use a 10-year-old median family income or one for 2010, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, because I think all things being the same, will probably be in the 25 to 30% range anyway. So that's not going to make that much of a difference. Again, the question is whether median family income, which measures an ability to pay, should be incorporated into equalization, when equalization is simply to say have the same amount of taxes being collected from the same amount of real estate in every community. That's where the problem was. Before you had a personal income tax and people were paying taxes based on their income, that would have been a legitimate way of doing equalization, because then you would consider a community that had a higher income so that they would be yielding more in terms of payment for service. But once the income tax went into effect, the idea of using the median family income really should have fallen to the wayside, and it hasn't. And it's been out there ever since. But I mean, it was, when Governor Leach put that first income tax in, I think it was 1974. And since that time, median family income really is a disservice to an equalization study.
I think Kevin actually had the next question. And Mike, I'll come to you.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the timeline that the school committee is facing now. We have known about this potential revenue shortfall for a while now. I believe Steve, January-ish, told us about this potential revenue shortfall at the time. So we've put together some different scenarios. We have pushed a lot of hard decisions as late as we can. We are at the point now, some of our revenue assumptions we could deal with a little later on. In other words, if we decide to not do middle school sports, that is something we can definitely put in the September timeframe. But some of them, especially some of the bigger ticket items, we are not able to do that. And an example obviously would be school consolidation due to unemployment laws and everything else. Our drop dead date for some of these is May 25th. After May 25th, the sun sets on some of the things we can do. And consolidation's one of them, but there's a few others. So that's what we're faced with. So we have a meeting on the 20th, this coming Thursday, where we're going to discuss also the movement of the 5th grade to Broad Rock, but also then on the 25th. After the 25th, our flexibility is greatly reduced. So from our standpoint, you know, the quick thing, you know, people jump as well, there's definitely a lot of doubt in this funding formula. If we close our eyes and say, okay, we're going to leave it along with the governor's proposal, which we did incorporate a reduction in state aid of roughly 5% versus the 3.8. So we have a little bit of cush there, and that passes, then our revenue assumptions are okay. But if it goes in the other direction, we're looking at as bad as a $1.4 million deficit before we open the doors in September. We've also used some of the funds for this current year, because there was some in the supplemental budgets for this current year, there were some cuts. So we set aside some funds and have our designated funds for that. So we're kind of looking at the worst case scenario where we could have a situation where not only is next year 1.4, but depending on how the supplemental budget goes, which will be in June, that could be more than we're anticipating. So we could be looking at serious, serious cash flow problems as early as September. So from a committee standpoint, we got to deal with that, and we're out of time. Quite frankly, we're out of time.
Thank you, Kevin. Mike's next, then you, Donna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I have a sort of a question of clarification for Mr. Alfred. Now, would one, I guess, assume that we're double counting?
Mike, could you move that microphone?
Yeah, that we are double counting, if you will, if we have median family income factor and also the assessed values, because on a per capita basis, the assessed value in communities that have a higher median income would be higher. You have essentially real estate is more valuable on a population basis. So in effect, South Kingstown and a number of the, let's say, wealthy communities would be double counted in that fact. They're not independent variables.
I'm not sure I would agree with that as a conclusion. I think that if you look at what's here, is that you're taking, what equalization is supposed to do is simply say, what's the taxable property in every community, regardless of whether there's houses that are worth $1 million here or, you know, $50,000 there. Mm-hmm. And that's what you get in this process when you get to the equalized weighted assessment value. When you get down to that third set of numbers, that $5,232 million is the equalized weighted assessment value. That's what we look at, and that's what you would use to come up with a statewide tax rate, so that you would say, okay, the Providence may have a value of $14.5 million, but this is, if you use the statewide tax rate, it's going to generate the same dollars per thousand. When you introduce the median family income, that's the first poverty driver in the formula. And as you can see, they're saying, well, because you've got a higher value, you should pick up 20% more than what you really had as an equalized value. Mm-hmm. And in Providence, if you're only at 40% of median family income, you should take out 43% of your value. Mm-hmm. So that's the first poverty driver. The second poverty driver is when you take the percentage of kids that are in the free reduced lunch program as a percentage of the total population in the school system, and then you take those two numbers, the equalized weight that's been reduced for the suburban community and increased for those that are below on median family income, and you match that with that second formula for poverty, which is the PK through 6. You take those two and you come up with the median value with the square root. That's where you've got two values that are providing a great deal more support for low-income community than it would be for a suburban community, because it's a double weighted factor.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, Donna?
My question is for Kevin. Why the date of May 25th? Seems very soon.
In simplest terms, I'll give you an example, and this is in no order of what we're gonna do here. But let's say on our list here, we decide to eliminate a school nurse teacher, okay? So those layoff notices are out. So on June 1st, we stop paying unemployment insurance to that school nurse teacher. And we, excuse me? Day after school, June 31st.
June 30th?
But June 1st, we have to notify, day after school. So we would pay unemployment insurance throughout the summer.
Yeah.
And then say September or whenever it comes around, we decide, let's put that person back on. Well, then we can do that, but we've now paid that unemployment insurance, waiting. So that's just an example of what we're facing. Same thing with the school consolidation, which is actually even a little worse. It's not like if we decide we have to tell the teachers if they're being laid off or not. I think it was 99 people we notified. Kristen can speak to the exact, she's the one who would have to deal with it more than me.
I apologize ahead of time for my voice. So if you imagine that we've laid off 99 teachers at this point, we haven't done the layoffs for teacher assistants or custodians yet. They would have to come in the next 2 meetings. And you make a decision about the consolidation of a school or not offering full-day kindergarten, then we would need time. We'll take the consolidation of a school. In May, typically, teachers and principals are meeting to determine class placement for the next year. So we're determining what all the 4th grades look like. We're determining what all the 3rd grade classes makeup looks like. And that happens, I've pushed that off a little bit. We certainly want to make those decisions with teachers still in school. We certainly want to make those decisions with parent input. We don't want to be making those decisions in August about which students are going to be in which school, depending upon the makeup of the classrooms at that time. We don't want to be letting families who, when they registered with us for kindergarten registration or called when their children were toddlers and said, do you have half-day K or full-day K in South Kingstown? And we told them full-day K. It's unfair to let them know in August when it's impossible to find a full-day K in August if they would need one, or to make work arrangements. We would need to notify them. We would need to furlough permanently half the amount of kindergarten teachers and kindergarten teacher assistants that we have currently. In addition, from a moving and maintenance perspective, we have summer work that happens to clean our schools when it's a typical year. Not any movement, not any consolidation, typically cleaning schedule. And that's very burdensome for custodians because certainly teachers want to be in their classrooms to work long after school lets out and long before the students arrive. And they have to have time where the building is cleared in order to do things like floors and whatnot. The moving of supplies, those all have to be considered, and as well as summer work projects. So you get to a point where beyond the May 25th time, we certainly could make some decisions, as Kevin alluded to, but your list of choices on the matrix would be collapsed.
Any other questions of Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kristen, if we're able to put out the budget supplemental, and we can get those figures to you by the end of the first week of June, I know that you probably had sent out the notices by the 25th. I think we kicked that date back. But the students would still be in school, and you'd actually have a hard number that you could then, I mean, go back and change what you planned. I hate to do that to you, but it may not be as draconian as you believe right now, but you would have that. We're going to try to get that figure to the first week of June.
That would be for 11 and 10, Don?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, we'll share this, okay.
So I did hear you say that in the beginning, and that was something that I had captured in my notes and was planning to take it back to the school committee. It wouldn't be my decision to be able to say, you know, this is something that the school committee agreed that May 25th would be their, you know, drop dead date, if you will. So certainly that can be something that I can share with the school committee. I mean, most of them are here today. But are you saying that it would be the supplemental and the fiscal year 2010 and a decision on funding formula?
Yes, it'll all be.
All three?
Well, I don't know about funding formula.
Because the funding formula is the big idea.
You know definitely whether or not it's going to be implemented in the next year. But at this point, I'm not.
You mean passed?
Passed.
Yep.
We can pass it and not implement it
Right.
until next July, which gives
That would be our favorite scenario. We like that. We
Or
hope-
sometime in the future.
Yes.
100 years from now.
You would have that answer as well by the time we do the supplemental and the 11 budget, and that would be part of the budget that.
That's encouraging.
So we try to shed some light so you can actually, you know, get some time to adapt to whatever changes are going to be made.
And everyone believes that? Is
Yeah,
everyone weighing in
let's
on that?
get the
that
poll
that's-
of everybody.
If I may, Madam President, remember, we passed an extension to June 15th on the vehicle tax and whatnot, so that's a hard deadline that we set for ourselves. And with the certain posting requirements that when the budget comes up, you know, it has to be posted for much longer than a normal piece of legislation does. So it would be in the committee process of being posted and voted on in the early June if it were to go through the entire system by the 15th, so that the decision on whether those other payments are made
So not
or
the
not.
first week. Maybe the
15th.
No, but that's when it would be in the you know, it would be coming up through the committees at the beginning of June.
Before you have to vote on it, but generally speaking, the budget, once it comes out of finance with the cooperation of the Senate,
So,
You guys are doing all the talking here. I haven't had a chance to say too much.
But
You're
if
doing
it-
all the talking, all the agreements here. No,
But-
I agree with you, Don. Well, the 2010 and 2011 will come out together. They're going to come out rather soon. The best news is that the revenues are up after the caseload revenue estimating conference. Revenues are up, 38 million for 2010, 46 or 48 million for 2011. It's modest, but it's good. So it looks like we won't be having to get in the rainy day fund. But as far as what Don said and what the other rep said, I do believe you'll see it 2010, 2011 coming out very shortly. I think the funding formula will come out, but I don't think the date will be as a passage. I think it will probably be implemented next year or the year after that. That's my forecast on that. I don't know that for sure. That's going to depend on a lot what happens in the House Finance Committee as well as the Senate Finance Committee, as well as input that you have in your meeting with the commissioner. You know, everything is going to weigh in on that. But I do feel very strongly there will be a school funding formula bill passed, but not implemented in 2011.
I just want to make one thing clear from my perspective, and I'll let the council see whether they agree with it. I'm more concerned with the funding formula as it's presented than I am on its implementation date. Because just to assume that we're going to take the commissioner's funding formula and say it's going to be passed, but it won't be implemented till next year, we've got to look at the long-term future of the community rather than the short-term gain of a year. And it's going to be very important for us to make sure that whatever formula gets passed is in fact fair and equitable. Do I assume South Kingstown will lose some funding support in relation to the state? Absolutely. But to the degree that this one proposes, I don't think that's fair. But what I want to make sure it's clear is that I don't want to see the funding formula passed and say, well, gee, we put it off a year, and you should be happy with that, because in the long run, God knows the years turn very fast around here.
Yeah, and before he goes, he asked the council, I think I speak for everybody on the council, that we want it more fair versus pushing it off, is exactly what Steve is saying, because we're just only pushing off the inevitable. There are cracks here that we can see, and we have to harp on them, and you have to let the other senators and representatives know, because if they pass it through and these cracks and we can make more of an issue about it, then we're gonna be in lawsuits over this whole thing. And I mean, let's get it right, or at least semi-fair, and again, we know we're gonna lose money, but let's be fair about it. That's all we're asking, and all we're asking you to bring forward, because, you know, I listened to, you know, part of the hearing, not all of it, because Chairman Constantino, God bless him, that was tough that day. But a lot of it was more of emotional type pleas and that type of a thing, versus the hard numbers. And, you know, the devil is in the detail, and that's where, you know, things can change. And I think that this is brought to light. I think the RIDE people asked Steve for some of his numbers because they started saying, maybe we should start taking a look at this, which is what, you know, the whole value of him going up there is for. But that's, I think, what the council wants. We know it's coming, but again, we want the work done beforehand, not pushing it off for a year and say, all right, well, we push it off. That's not a success for us at all.
Madam President.
All right, go ahead, Sue.
First of all, I want to say thank you to Steve and the council for your comments, because a lot of the comments you originally made on the commissioner's proposal were very good, and they're in the Senate fiscal notes. They've been looked at, and they're in full agreement. I want to make it clear that the Senate is not condoning the commissioner's her formula. That's why we have a separate Senate bill. It's still out there. We're hearing what you're saying.
Okay.
You have made some absolutely fantastic comments for the Senate to look at and for the House. So these are definitely being digested, and we have to make this right.
Sue, has Peter put out comments on behalf of Senate Finance at this point?
I have some brief ones, but they'll be out tomorrow for
Okay.
the hearing tomorrow. But he's told me over and over again, you know, the notes that you have brought up have been excellent. And it's been right on where the Senate policy, fiscal policy staff agrees with that, a lot of the comments that you have brought up.
I saw a whole bunch of hands before over there. I didn't know if everybody was done. All right, Jim?
Yeah, will the EFF debate determine whether or not our General Assembly members make a decision whether to tackle the current year deficit with tough decisions, or will that debate change that and you'll roll everything out into the next year's budget, putting even more pressure on us? What are we looking at here? What has to fall first? Can you give me some connecting of the dots here? So,
I'd be glad to try
Go
to
ahead,
answer your
Sue.
question. I want to say that, you know, in the 2010, the supplemental budget, you know, we did focus on a lot of those issues that you were speaking about, giving, you know, the fact that Rhode Island's in such a difficult fiscal position, and the economic circumstances have required some very difficult choices. But one thing that we are continuing to do in the 2010, because it hasn't been passed yet, but I understand there's serious negotiations going on, so it's going to happen soon, and there's communications going on between the House and the Senate, which is good. But we've continued to work on closing the budget gaps without raising any broad-based taxes. I think that's really important that that's maintained so we can maintain competitive in our region. And we did modify the state employee teacher pensions and restricting the COLA. Our agreement in the Senate was to the first $35,000 of pension benefits, and I believe the House is in agreement on that also. And restoring the third quarter payment for the motor vehicle excise tax to the communities. And being able to partially restore the fourth quarter also. And there will be some relief for the maintenance of effort requirements to the schools. So, you know, we're continuing to work on that in 2011. You know, the governor wants to eliminate, you know, the car tax program. It doesn't look like there'll be a lot of resources in the next budget to restore that. I mean, that's, so I think that's a victory for the municipalities if we get the partial fourth quarter in the 2010. Now, there's some of the Medicaid spending because of the stimulus money. It looks like there's more money being spent on Medicaid and so forth. Well, there is, but it's because money has come in from the federal government. So it looks like we're spending more. Yes, we are, but it's not Rhode Island taxpayers' money. It's coming in from the federal government. So, you know, we're continue to work on these issues and tighten things up, but there are some things that look like we're spending more. Again, it looks like that, and we are, but it's not taxpayers' money. Well, I guess it's all taxpayers' money, even though it does come from the stimulus
It still
money.
is, yes.
And on the school finance reform, as we've all been talking about, I can't emphasize enough how much we all feel that Department of Education, you know, I have a great deal of respect for them, but what that proposal has serious impacts, not only for South Kingstown, but a lot of communities across the state. So we're continuing to look at that very seriously. But I don't know, I guess I kind of rambled on, Jim. I don't know if I totally...
But are we going to see a supplemental budget attacking some of our current
Yes.
deficits, so it just won't be
Yes.
everybody
Yes.
batten down the hatches next year to go through
Oh,
this?
no, there's some serious choices that have been agreed on, and you'll see them.
Thank
Very
you.
serious.
Thank you.
Alan, I have a question for you. From last Thursday, you had a question for Professor Wong. I know when you were doing the testimony, I never knew if you ever got an opportunity to speak with him or regarding the formula.
No, they were going at the end, or, so
Busting up the joint.
hopefully we'll get that answer for Wednesday night.
Okay.
And I have talked to Carolyn Diaz at RIDE, so hopefully they'll follow up on that Wednesday night.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, Madam
Go ahead, Sue.
Wednesday night, this is a regular council meeting, will be held here. Is it 7 o'clock with the commissioner, or is it just a special?
Just a special, it's not a regular council meeting, it's just a public hearing.
And
Yeah. So
everybody
you are
will
more
be
than
here.
welcome to come, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, so we'd like it for all our representatives to come, actually. So we'll take this as your personal invite.
Thank you.
All right, Dave?
Thank you. You know, Sue brought up many good points, and I think one of the more significant ones, and Steve, you mentioned the income tax before, is that the last several years, the state has faced some very challenging economic times, as has the town, and we all want to be fair, but we all have to do our part. I mean, if you look at some of the measures the state has taken, from reducing the number of state employees by several thousand, by leaving another several thousand positions unfilled, by making difficult decisions, and they're not easy. They're not easy when you have to look at people who've been working for the state for decades, who are relying on something that they thought was coming to them, and changing the deal, so to speak. And you know, we've made some very difficult decisions over the last several years because they needed to be made. However, they weren't enough. But what we've tried to avoid at any cost is raising taxes, revenues, taxes, whatever you want to call them. Because I think we can all agree that's a place that would be a last resort, to go back to the tax base and try to raise taxes. I mean, just here in town, a penny on the property tax brings in, was it 40,000, Steve? A penny? So I mean, if we're talking to keep the school open $500,000, you know, it's pennies on the tax rate, but we don't want to go there. We don't want to have to go to the whole town. And I'm not sure if I mean, that wouldn't be our decision, obviously, it would be yours, but as resistant as you want to be to go to the revenue side and raise revenues or raise taxes, we're in the same boat. And we've been struggling through these last few budgets and doing that and not having to go there. So, you know, it's, you know, $1 million is a lot of money, but, you know, in a $60 million school budget, it's 1.5%, 1.6%, 1.7%. And, you know, we face the difficult decisions at the state level with much bigger numbers, but they're similar issues. And, you know, you have to prioritize where we make these decisions, and they affect the everyday lives of all Rhode Islanders in some aspects. Or in other aspects, they affect a small group much greater than the everyday lives. But raising taxes hurts everybody. And, you know, we're facing these several $100 million deficits for the current year and 300 or 400 for next year. And, you know, we have to come out with a plan now, as Don said, in the next few weeks to address all of that and try not to raise revenues or raise taxes. But, you know, if you look over the history of the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, we've had to make some very, very difficult decisions to try to balance these budgets. It's not easy. You try to see both sides of it from the taxpayer point of view and also from the people who are being directly affected, like some of the pension changes. It takes a lot of courage to do that when you're getting calls from both sides of that equation, yet we, like you, have to look at the hard numbers and know we have to balance that budget according to the Constitution every year. And when the revenues are not there, that's when the toughest decisions have to be made, and we're all in that same boat right now. But, you know, to tie the funding formula directly, especially this year, to the closing of a school, I think is a little bit of a leap, because there is a $60 million budget there on the local level. And to tie that directly, I think, certainly we don't want to see it happen. We'd love to provide, you know, more than enough money than everybody needs, but there's tough decisions all around. And we want to work with you as much as we can to avoid the impact on the children of South Kingstown and also on the taxpayers. So hopefully in the next few weeks when we're working on not only the funding formula, or on Wednesday when Commissioner Gist is here, and when the budget comes out in the next few weeks, we'll at least be able to you know, try to move everything in the same direction rather than pull each other apart. Thank you.
Alan?
Sue, question for you. As far as the pension reform that you mentioned on the COLA at $35,000, the governor's proposed supplemental for 2010 had a reduction pension scoop of $564,000.
Right.
Any idea what the value is as far as what the Senate is proposing?
Well, what the governor had proposed was basically doing away with it altogether. And in negotiations that between the House and Senate, that wasn't acceptable. I mean, you know, if you look at reality, I mean, there is a compounding factor in the COLA and so forth and so on. But that's where the agreement was on restricting it to the first 35,000.
Right, but as far as the difference in like the governor's proposal, eliminating the COLA, was going to save $565,000 in the 2010 year. That was part of the supplemental budget.
Right.
Any idea what the value is comparable for the Senate version?
Well, actually, that's agreement between the House and the Senate, that 35,000, and I don't have the figures right here in front of me. I don't know if do you have it, David?
What specifically is it, Sue? I have a lot of charts here.
He's looking for the change. The governor had a full scoop without any percentage at all. I mean, it was just a full taking away.
On the school funding?
No, that would be on pensions, teacher pensions. And the
no. Let's see.
I think we'll have to look.
I don't have the pension
material here.
Just so that we can plug the number in and see where we end up, because that's going to be important for the current year school fund surplus.
And the foundation for the following year.
Right, that's right.
Sue, why didn't you follow Massachusetts and Connecticut with a $12,000 maximum COLA?
That was talked about. That was talked about, and I believe at 12,000 was talked about originally, and the 35,000 was a compromise.
Okay, the reason I bring that up, because the last statistics from the Treasurer's Office had teachers' pensions now running around 43,000, state workers around 25, 26. So actually, that's above average. I mean, heaven's sake, so we haven't even reached that for an average number yet.
And I want to say
that's, I mean, are you telling us that you're going to be spending that much more money, that we have to climb to that level? I mean, you see how that's out of balance with the current?
If I could interject, the state of Massachusetts does not tax the pensions of the teachers, so there's no income tax on their pensions. So that's why we believe it was set so low at 12,000, where we in Rhode Island.
And there were other factors involved too.
Yeah.
To equalize what was going on.
Yeah, but I'll bet if I do the math, it's not even close. We are very expensive here with that. I think it's obvious, plus people would be in the retirement age, retirement tax status. Probably the difference would be very slight. You know, I'd be happy to work on some formulas on that. Or Don, if you have some formulas, I'd love to see that.
What,
Go ahead. No, that's just me.
I want to say that, you know, we've been working at this. This has been progress going on over the years, as Representative Caprio said and Representative Lally. As things go forward, we keep getting into this and ratcheting it down more and more and more. Would it have been easier if we had a crystal ball 10 years ago or 5 years ago and knew what was going to happen with the economy? We probably would have made those changes back then. But everything is not equal. We look at every benefit as compared to other states. We're looking at the ages that people are going to retire. There's so many factors involved that, yes, we probably will continue to make changes, because we have been. So as time goes on, there will be more and more changes made, but we don't want to be draconian about it either.
If I can add one other thing, I think 4 out of the last 5 years, we've unilaterally changed the state workers and the teachers' pensions and their contracts, which many of them have been negotiated out in good faith. And you hate to interject what we say we have to do when sometimes they've given up raises so they didn't pay so much in health care, or they've negotiated these out in good faith. And those are real hard choices for us to make. I mean, when we have to talk to, I know a lot of teachers, I know a lot of state workers, and we've changed the rules that they've negotiated, and we've never been at the table when they, in good faith, negotiated those. So, we have made those hard decisions, and you hate to change a contract unilaterally when two sides have met and supposedly had negotiated in good faith, but it looks like if we cap the COLAs at the first 35, I think it'll be 5 out of the last 6 years that we've done it. So, we're making tough choices, and, none of us, when we hate to do it, I mean, they are negotiated in good faith, but we realize what we can't afford, and what we can afford, and what we can't afford as a state. So, it's just those are tough decisions to make for us.
And I'm sure they're tough decisions, and the poor folks out here who don't have pensions or who have IRAs are just licking their chops, wishing they were a teacher. Believe me, the state workers are a far distance from the teachers. The teachers have a very good deal, so hopefully you're not apologizing for them, because the people I represent have nothing for retirement, nothing. So you really need to investigate where the equilibrium is between that.
Mike?
To some extent, I have to disagree with Mr. O'Neill in this, is that, fundamentally teachers they're a profession. They're like doctors, they're like lawyers. They're basically trained professionals. And I would really hope that society would value the contributions that they make. It is really a tough time, and oftentimes it's an easy solution often to sort of take a look at other people in our society and say, gee, they're doing much better than me. But a lot of people who are in business, they have chosen various professions, they're there, they've worked hard to get there. On the grand scale of things, over the years, we have been very, very diligent in trying to trim the size of state budget. And the personnel budget in the state is recognized as being very, very large. I'm looking right here at essentially the size of the state employees of the state back in 1989. There were 17,000 people working for the state. Now, not now. We're essentially 3,000 people shorter than we were back then. It's not like we're sort of being spendthrifts in any way, shape, or form. We've been going through a lot of these reductions, but we can't really be draconian about this. It's the same argument that is essentially being made by Mr. Alfred in terms of the rather large jumps that we have to the state. Small incremental shocks are easier to absorb and plan for, large draconian things are not. And that goes true not only for state or municipalities, but also families that have planned their lives around a certain amount of retirement, especially professionals.
And my response to that would be, in the grand scale of things, we could have a lot more of those people employed if we didn't have such huge pensions and post-retirement health care. And if you haven't looked nationally or over in Europe, you'll see that that particular issue is what is bearing most economies. So in the grand scale of things, I think you need to really relook at this, and maybe we don't have to lay off all these people, but we need the defined contribution from the defined benefit plan. We have to change all of that. We just cannot afford it. We cannot afford it.
Madam Chair.
Mike?
I agree 100% with you in that we have to change it. I think that we could agree on that and sort of beginning down the path, that pathway. But certainly people that are vested, have been in the system for a while. It's pretty much unfair in that they have essentially built their career thinking that it's going to be one way, sending their kids to one set of schools, buying one set of houses. It's basically quite unfair to people.
All right. Alan?
Question for anybody up there. As far as the recent lawsuit that was filed by the teacher and state workers unions as far as last year's changes to the pension benefits, any timetable on that as far as when we could expect, how long that process will take?
I don't have a crystal ball. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
No, go ahead.
I don't have a crystal ball on that. I wouldn't have any idea. Maybe some of the attorneys here would have more of an idea than I would when there'd be either a settlement or a decision.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it is in the process. I could probably get that information for you for Wednesday, but it could be stuck there for quite a year or two, or longer, but I don't think there's any imminent settlement that I know of.
But obviously, a negative impact on that would have a devastating impact in the future year.
Absolutely.
Yes, it would. Okay. Well, we've kind of jumped around a little bit here. But I'll try to close out the education funding formula part. Has everybody spoken their piece or said it? For now. Okay. And we did touch upon this a bit about the supplemental budget. So where are we? We're not quite sure. We've had some debate on what the date or the time frame would be, only because June, okay? Soon in June.
Madam Chair, can I just, if I could ask a question on the time frame to the school committee before you go past that topic.
Okay.
This year, the early June is the earliest I've ever seen the budget come through the process since I've been at the State House, and it's been about 10 years now. And I guess the question is, what would you do in the other years when oftentimes the budget wouldn't come through until the last days of June or sometimes even the first few days of July with those same issues that you're talking about? I mean, to tell us a drop-dead date is in a few weeks, knowing that, like I said, the budget normally wouldn't come through for a month after that.
Go ahead, Scott.
Historically, the school committee has operated by using the governor's proposed budget. General Assembly has historically either passed it as presented or, frankly, has enriched the support for public education. And so we've worked with Steve and Alan and the members of the town council to adopt a conservative philosophy of the governor's proposed budget is as bad a picture as it's going to be. we will plan that that's what happens, and if there is additional revenue, because we never have information frankly, from the General Assembly about what the budget's going to be. We have gotten used to the fact that the General Assembly makes decisions in a time frame that doesn't work for anybody but state government. So every year, we pass a budget not knowing what the state is going to do, but we have targeted the state aid to education dollars on the governor's budget because that has been the most conservative picture. That is, frankly, we are in a different world now. I've been on the school committee for 18 years. I have never been in a position where before Kristen and John gave us the budget, they cut $300,000, and in order to achieve a 0% increase on the school side, we cut $1.2 million, and we are still talking about $1 million, $1.3 million, $1.4 million cuts that may come. There is nothing in our history that allows us to learn from that past practice. And so the decision about May 25th is a decision recognizing that frankly, we're not counting on the General Assembly to make the choices. We have operational considerations, and we cannot pass a budget. Our budget has already been proposed and acted on by the town council, but we need to have sufficient cuts to protect ourselves from, frankly, last-minute cuts in revenue from the General Assembly. And so we're talking about, okay, we've now, excuse me for my interest in jazz, we've now cut in this year $1.5 million, and what we're trying to do is to figure out, well, it looks like we will have to cut at least another $500,000. Maybe we can do that, but suppose it's not $500,000, suppose it's 2 $500,000 chunks that we have to take, or a little bit more because we lose group home aid. So where, after we have proposed a budget and we've negotiated it with our financial people and the town's financial people, and we've worked with the members of the town council, where do you go for another $1.4 million worth of cuts? If we are going to protect ourselves from the fact, frankly, that you're in a position where you can't make decisions, that flows downhill. We don't have the choice of not making decisions. And when you're talking about numbers that large, there are very few. I mean, I appreciate tough choices, and in a $60 million budget, what's another $1 million or $2 million to cut? And that seems like a flippant response. My feeling is that there are, when we've looked at the budget, there are a limited number of items that get you enough protection so that if the General Assembly brings us more bad news on top of a budget already approved, that we can accommodate that in operations. And so we have asked the superintendent, if we had to consolidate a school, how many weeks do you need to accomplish that? And I think that Kristen has given us a fair estimate. Give me 4 weeks and maybe I can consolidate a school. I have no clue how 4 weeks gets that job done, but that's where it is. And to push to say, well, why not the middle of June? You knew that we've never had a budget earlier. What you are functionally doing is asking Kristen to close a school in a week and a half. Well, I don't know that that's a reasonable operational consideration. I understand it may fit timelines, but at our end of the business, you have to run a school system, and people need to know whether they're going to have a job next year, and parents have a right to know where their children are going, and we need to figure out the bus, and all those operational considerations, and those don't adjust to the difficulties in the General Assembly in making these tough choices. I understand you have tough choices, we have tough choices, but the timeline is, in my judgment, not arbitrary. It is at the razor's edge of what it takes to run a school system without essentially telling parents, well, you know, we don't know, we'll let you know in September where your child is going. That's not reasonable, and you wouldn't want it that way.
No. Thank you, Scott.
If I could just add one question, because I am kind of thinking through the first of June timeframe, and maybe you guys know from the unemployment standpoint, when do we have to notify, what's our unemployment, our callback situation with the teachers, Kristen? I'm a little unsure of those dates.
They've already been furloughed.
Yep.
Excuse me, they'll be eligible to file for unemployment if we don't call them back before the end of the school year.
Okay. So we have till June 24th.
Till the school committee meeting, because remember, you need a school committee meeting to vote on the bringing them back to job fair. And then I need a job fair to actually put them in a job. And then I need the end of the school year. And that's how we backed
To May
us
25th.
into.
May 25th. That's what I thought.
Okay. Can I just, Don, and then Carol.
In speaking to Kevin, you've done your job, as far as the governor said, to expect a 3.8% reduction. You've based your budget reducing the aid by 5%, and that does not include closing any schools.
Correct.
Okay. So when we deliver the message up to the State House, we've got to look and make sure that your cut for this coming year is 5% or less for you to stick with your budget.
Is that fair enough?
Okay, that's fair enough.
Fair enough.
It gives us some hard numbers to work with.
Alan?
Dave, just to add to what Scott said, and during the time when the state revenues have been volatile as far as the state aid, we don't know when we adopt the budget. There's always been a handshake agreement between the town council and the school committee, so that if additional revenues come in over what that conservative budget is for the school aid, then the school doesn't spend it. What they do is they bring it to fund balance, and then they use it in a future year to offset the tax increase.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Carol?
Kristen, I just wanted to know when the job fair is. When do you usually schedule that? And does it have to be before the end of school?
By contract, teachers are entitled to a June job fair. And for those who've not planned or run a job fair, you can't just, I don't want to simplify it, but you can't just have a list of scenarios and walk in cold and say, okay, this kindergarten teacher retired, so we have a kindergarten opening. This history teacher retired, so we have a history opening. It's sort of like a planned out process in flowchart style in order to prepare myself and then work with the teachers union to look at what all the scenarios that could happen in job fair, people bumping other people, people being protected and having a job even if they're bumped, the recall list. Right now, I'm unable to plan out a scenario for job fair. That's what I should be doing right now. It should map it all out on a whiteboard or a computer program. I'm unable to do that because I don't know what the landscape of the district will look like. And so I need you to backfill me time. I couldn't plan it out in a weekend. I would need time to be able to sit down and make sure that if this English teacher was laid off from their position, they were also certified in music and kindergarten and phys ed, then they could essentially, I'd have to make a flow chart to see they could bid here or here or here. That would prevent this person from being recalled or this person. It's a very dynamic process. That's just one piece of this. Another piece, so the short answer is there's a June job fair.
June, but it has to be before the end of the year, before the end of the school year.
Typically what's happened is that at the first school committee meeting in June, I'm told, that's the date that I would have to be prepared to call back a certain host of that, as many as I could.
So you have to anticipate all of the people.
I need
that
between
you've got to come back.
May 25th and the first school committee meeting in June, which is only a few days. to be able to say, these are the teachers I want to call back to job fair. In order to do that, I have had to have mapped out what the job fair could potentially look like. Like, if I call back one person who's a very tenured teacher, and they're not, I've misstepped, there really isn't a job that's going to be available for them. That could be $100,000 change. So it's got to be done right, and I need a little time to do that with my staff.
Just along with that, Chris, has the Department of Education eliminated seniority, or does our contract override that? What do you face along those lines for the job
Right
fair?
now, seniority is certainly how we determine which teachers are laid off and which teachers assume positions at job fair. As of July 1st, the new BEP has language that talks about criterion-based hiring and criterion-based transfer, I guess, what you'd call it, instead of seniority. We wouldn't fall under that requirement this July because our contract is not expired. So as Mr. Lally pointed out, we bargained in good faith a seniority provision of our contract. It would be my hope that for this year that we would work with the teachers to develop some sort of a criterion-based hiring process and bumping process or lateral transfer process, so that when we were coming under state law a year later, we would have a plan in place, and it was something that we agreed to.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, I think we've covered the first topic. And I guess when we looked at the supplemented 10 budget, we talked about the value of aid to education, and where we're at with that. The motor vehicle tax reimbursement, I think Sue has kind of addressed that. I don't know if the House, anybody from the House has any more to add to that? No? No?
I think we're in agreement. That's okay. We're in agreement with what Sue said, and we'll work towards the third quarter and as much of the fourth quarter as we can deliver to you.
Okay, all right. And then we kind of touched upon the impact on the pension reforms, a little bit of dialogue, the kind of the things that we wanted to look at in the supplemental 10 budget. Excuse me. So we move on to the status of the 11, which we've kind of touched upon a few of the different things there, but if anybody wants to add anything about that. We talked about the impact of the proposed formula, the motor vehicle tax reimbursement there.
Kathy, could I?
Yep, go ahead, Steve.
One of the things that is going to be important in the 11 budget is how you address motor vehicles.
Yes.
And hopefully, if we're hearing that you'll have a budget by June 15th, we should know what we're getting. Because what I need to impress upon the legislators is that I can't print tax bills until I know what I can put on the back of the tax bill on whether the $6,000 exemption exists in some form or fashion, whether it's at $2,000, $4,000, or $10,000, or if it's at zero. So I can't print the bills, and if I can't print the bills, then I can't forward the bills to the company that sends them out for me to be able to get my bills out for the 4th of July. So it's important for us to really make sure that you understand we need to know where the motor vehicle is going so that we can, and every city in town can get the motor vehicles, the billing straightened out. There's one other issue that's really important this year that we've brought it up in the past, but it's for South Kingstown a $9 million issue. If you do away with the motor vehicle tax reimbursement program, the current legislation that's on the books today, and it's Chapter 44-34.1, has a provision in it that says that we cannot increase the value, the taxable value of a vehicle over what it was in the prior year. Why that's in the bill, or I should say in legislation, makes little sense to us. Essentially, what that means is when we run the tax roll for next year, assuming that the motor vehicle tax was eliminated, and that's how our budget was prepared, we would have $9 million we would have to take off of the tax roll if in fact that law stayed in place. One of the things that happens is that you have a motor vehicle committee that works with NADA bookings. When we had the price of gas go up to $4 a gallon, the value of big trucks and inefficient cars diminished, and people wanted to get rid of them. Now that the gas was back down, the value of those vehicles went up. With that phrase staying in the state statute, every city and town will be responsible for using the NADA value that they used in the current year, rather than what NADA value would be for the 2010-2011 year. So when the governor's original budget came out, he had wiped out the motor vehicle excise program. He'd wiped out the entire section 34-1.1. So it was gone if we were going to put it back on the tax roll. If there's anything other than doing away with the program in its entirety, that section needs to be addressed, because as I say, it's $9 million, and that $9 million means that we would have to take $158,000 and put it onto the real estate roll. So whatever you're going to do with the motor vehicles, our budget's been prepared, assuming that it was going to be lost. If you rightly keep the program in place, what the council will be asked to do is to amend the budget to increase the revenues by the value of what the state would contribute to us. If you don't, we've got to tax the full value of the motor vehicle. But that section, and again, I'll give you the section, it's 44-34.1-1, paragraph C, subsection 4. That section has to be dealt with if, in fact, you do away with the motor vehicle excise tax reimbursement program. Because every town, in fact, 2 years ago, we had to rebate taxes to people because that section came into play again with motor vehicles. And I want you to know that the first vehicle that we tested was Mr. Lord's vehicle, where it is going up. So we've called this the Lord factor, but it is something that we want to see you tax Allen at a higher rate.
But I also recommended that the legislation be changed so that
But please understand that's one facet of it. But if we can get the answers on the motor vehicle first week in June, we should be all set to be able to get the bills resolved. Again, we'd like to see the program stay in place, but if it doesn't stay in place, at least give us the ability to be able to put our framework together for the tax program.
And just let me add one thing on that. The value of that $9 million as far as property taxes is around $174,000. So it is a significant number that if we don't get it through the car tax, we'd have to add that to the real estate tax.
3 to 4 cents more on the rate. And the commercial properties in town are already seeing a major increase because their reductions on reval was only 10%. Residential is down 17%, but you're going to see, far more taxes burdened through the industrial and commercial base than it happened in the past. So a penny here or a penny there does make a difference to us.
I would think that, I'm sorry, but I would think we'd probably put that in the budget as well as a budget item. There's a lot of discussion among the reps that the tax rate here per thousand is much less than, say, Providence is like $72 per thousand.
Yes.
So what we had in the past, before we started doing this, we'd have a lot of people from Providence trying to register their vehicles in South Kingston or Narragansett. So we may open up, I'm not sure if we can get our hands around it, but we're trying to make it so regardless of whatever city or town you're in, your excise tax would be similar, because there's such a great disparity among Providence and here.
Just understand, since we're below what the state median is, if you raised it to $25, you'd see a much larger share coming out of the motor vehicle tax.
I think it'd probably be up to a certain level, and then you as a town would decide at what rate you'd set that.
Yeah, we'd be glad to review it with you, Don, if you want a second opinion from the municipal side on it.
Okay, as it progresses, I'll give you a call and let you know.
All right, so Then I guess we'll move on to item number 4, unless anybody has any more questions regarding that, which is, the council has unanimously approved opposition to House Bill 7581, the binding arbitration, and Senate Bill 2603, the mandatory contract, continuation, sorry. So we just wanted to let you know that that's where we stand, as these come forward.
The council resolutions were prepared.
Yeah,
in
I was
the
gonna say they are,
packet, so-
everybody has them on their desks, and you'll probably see them come through upstate too, but.
Thank you. Duly noted, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding any of that? Do you want to ask us about that?
I've got the message.
Okay.
I've got the message.
Well, our hands are getting more and more tired. We need, yeah, we do.
It's good
You know,
to
it's-
have a very firm resolution.
Yes.
Very
Okay.
helpful.
All right. And so then we have, moving on from there, other matters of mutual interest and concern.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
You've got one other bill.
Oh, did I?
The council
sorry.
requested the General Assembly representatives submit a bill, and it was
Oh, the
submitted as House 7024, and I'm sorry, Sue, I don't have the
Right, but
Senate
it's
side.
been introduced.
And that was so that it would change the date on, to 5 days before certification for veterans exemption filing. Right now, it's March 15th, and what we asked was to provide, we'd had a gentleman in that felt that if he'd had more time, he would have been able to apply. We had to put him off a year because he didn't meet the March 15th date. The bill was submitted, at this point, the bill is held for further study, and I was hopeful that we could get an update for the council as to where we stand with that legislation.
Okay. The bill was heard, and I've been in contact with the committee chairman on that, and he's been basically telling me it's still, they're considering it, so it'll be coming up again next time the committee hears it, is my understanding. No, there were no questions on the hearing, and no one seemed to be in opposition to it. Yeah. There was one discussion, I think, that it basically came from the representative from Woonsocket, and he basically asked why it was basically statewide. Wouldn't South Kingstown be dictating to other towns? And I basically said, well, it could be redrafted to just be South Kingstown and let all of the rest of the towns follow. And that was where the discussion was left.
Would there be any objection to having that legislation just for South Kingstown?
No, I don't think that there was any question on it. I mean, really what it came down to is that if you gave a person who was a veteran coming back from serving their country an extra 2 months so that they didn't have to wait 14 months to be able to get the tax credit, wouldn't that be a fairer situation? That was the question that was posed to the council. The council said, we agree, and we said to them, because the gentleman originally said, well, it should be something whenever you come in and apply, you should get it immediately. And we said, well, we can't do that because we have to certify the roll on June 15th. And he said, well, at least have it so it's, around June 15th. And, I mean, whether it was an enabling authority for South Kingstown alone or whether it was statewide, I don't think anybody was concerned with that, but rather wanting to provide that opportunity in South Kingstown.
Do it for South, and hopefully they'll jump on board and see that it is good for all the veterans.
Right. That was essentially my my rationale to the rep from Woonsocket who brought this up. That if seeing South Kingstown begins the trend, then perhaps other towns would be sort of good to their returning vets as well.
We'll be the leaders. I agree.
Okay, so we'll amend, we will amend it for South Kingston only, that language just for the town of South Kingston. Whatever
If
we
you,
have to
if you
do to
think
get
it will
done.
get through faster that way, and then that would be fine. I mean, we made a promise really to that gentleman about, getting that taken care of for him. That was a while ago, I feel.
So just to comment on that, with the bill, the existing language really doesn't provide a veteran with an explanation as to what their eligibility date is for filing. Because what it says now is on or before the last day on which sworn statements may be filed with the assessor for the year for which the exemption is claimed. And when I read that, I had no clue what that meant.
Right.
And that's why when we redrafted it to be 5 days prior to certification, it's certainly more clear as to what you're saying. The interpretation from our assessor was that's a March 15th date. But I said, if we've got legislation which isn't clear to the person that's going to have advantage or be put at disadvantage of it, maybe we need to clean up the language. So, yes, it has no difficulty if it becomes South Kingstown specific, but I think other communities should be equally concerned on whether or not the existing language is really something that's understood.
Okay. Oh, Liz. Can you grab one of the mics, Liz?
Just briefly, going back to S2603 and H7581, I'm just curious, it seemed to have died down for a little bit, over a period of time. Where does that stand right now? Is that due to be voted on anytime soon? Or have changes been made to it? No?
Want to speak for the Senate bill?
Yeah,
Sure.
Come on, yeah, please.
I know the Senate bill had been introduced, but you'll see it's different sponsors this year. There's only one sponsor, that's Senator McCaffrey from Warwick.
Okay.
I didn't co-sponsor it this year because of the opposition by the town council.
Okay.
And the school committee.
All right.
I don't know if the bill will be heard or what will go forward, but I know
Okay.
there was there was an outcry from just about every
Right.
city and town in opposition to the bill.
Right.
So I think it would probably have a tough time seeking passage, I would think.
Okay.
And someone
Is
of
that
my
for the House
esteemed
side
colleagues
too,
from the
or-
House can speak for the House bill.
Okay, the House, somebody from the House? Don?
I think I received a resolution from just about every city and town in the state opposing it. And in these economic times, I wouldn't be optimistic that it'll get out of committee.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you. Just curious.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay. So, now we'll move on to other matters of mutual interest and concern, and Polly, I think you stated you wanted to.
Oh, I was concerned about
Let's give you the mic, my friend.
I was interested to know what is happening with some new source of energy, thinking we need to do, I've spoken to Michael about this. What is being done to promote energy and encourage businesses to come into Rhode Island? And I thought new forms of energy would be an interesting way to get new businesses into Rhode Island. Is anything moving on that, or?
Okay.
Let's Sue go
Okay.
first. I want Sue to go first.
Oh, good, because I didn't like what Mike told me. That's why I'm bringing it up again.
Okay. Well, there's basically three major bills dealing with energy in the state of Rhode Island. One is mine as a prime sponsor is a biofuels blending bill, which basically brings us down the pathway of adding higher percentages of ethanol and agriculturally produced oils into diesel fuels and home heating fuels. This is similar to some acts that are in Massachusetts and California. We have a work group at the University of Rhode Island who is working with a group of stakeholders around the state, largely the home heating fuel industry, the motor fuel industry, and a few, we have some small industries in terms of blending, blending fuels, and the idea is to ramp that out. The status of that bill is that it has been heard in the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. There is a little bit of tweaking that is going on. The final version of the bill to be considered on the House floor is sitting in my office and should be dealt with next week. Bill number 2 is being heard by the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. This is a bill that is surrounding the methane production facility at the Johnston landfill. This bill by Representative Ucci from Cranston, with a number of Johnston, Cranston, is up for hearing tomorrow in the House Environment Committee, and actually up for a vote. This particular bill, what it basically does is allows the developer of that project, a Ridgewood Energy Corporation, to bypass some hearings by the PUC so that they can go directly into production and construction of their facility out at the Johnston landfill to avail of a number of federal tax breaks. This bill is looking good and is likely to pass the committee tomorrow. The third bill of interest is the wind power bill. Their proponents are Deepwater Energy Corporation, who propose to put in 8 wind turbines with a combined generation capacity of about 30 megawatts on the south end of Block Island within state waters. As people have probably heard, is that this proposal went to the Public Utilities Commission. The Public Utilities Commission rejected it, largely because the financing of this project was deemed not commercially favorable to the ratepayers of the state of Rhode Island in its totality. So in effect, the bill that is has been introduced basically starts the clock back again and removes the Public Utilities Commission from the equation and allows the governor and his various departments to go through an approval process that basically puts this project back on track. However, and Senator Sosnowski is a sponsor of the Senate side of the bill. However, there's a deal of controversy over this in that the financial structuring of this is really unfavorable to Rhode Island ratepayers, and there is a move to try to return the Public Utilities Commission in some subsequent versions of this bill to have some sort of oversight over and approval over any kind of annual rate increases that might be built into the contract to see if they are actually warranted. There are some allegations that even though this is a demonstration project, essentially a great big experiment, that there is an undue amount of profit by some of the developers in this, and that is a source of a lot of discussion. So,
There's actually one more, if I may continue on, Polly. There's another bill that's going to be voted on. I just checked on my email while Mike was speaking. Tomorrow, also in the Environment Committee, it's a bill that I sponsored along with to allow National Grid. It's called the decoupling bill. It's a little complicated, but in essence, National Grid derives their profit based upon usage. So the more that people would use, the more money they would earn. However, they have a focus now on efficient energy, including generating and purchasing green energy. So those two interests kind of go head to head with each other, because on one hand they need usage to earn money, and on the other hand they're trying to get green energy to reduce usage of their customers. So what this legislation would do, and again it's being voted on tomorrow, it would decouple the profits based upon solely of usage in an effort to allow them now to go out and seek more efficient forms of energy, whether it's wind or buying it or getting it from other areas of the country that are not, from fossil fuels and whatnot. So it decouples the two to allow them to pursue more efficient delivery of a green and efficient energy.
Donna, was that what you were going to say?
It's a very good consumer bill.
Yes, I was, but as to the deep water issue, it should be in the forefront of our energy policy. I mean, we have to have a certain amount of energy that comes from renewable energy sources. We also have the jobs part of this. Even though that small project is supposedly only going to generate about 30 to 35 jobs that are construction jobs, and then 6 full-time jobs. But so much is going on at Quonset in that we've gotten several $1 million worth of grants for training programs. Plus we've got that crane that's going to go in there that would help in the construction of these turbines. So it's a little bit more than what we would normally pay for our electricity or our energy needs, but what Senator Sosnowski and I also have to consider, and I am the co-sponsor of that bill in the House, is that we represent Block Island, and they have the 5th highest energy costs in the state. So their needs are important too. And I think that when you look at how important this small project is, it's important in terms of, will we be able to get the regulatory issues resolved in this state so that people who want to invest in this project, in the large project, will see that there is the will to do so and that it can be done in New England. Looking at Cape Wind, you see that it's taken 10 years to even get started and off the ground. So hopefully we can be among the first in the country to do this and develop a new industry and also enhance our renewable energy portfolio.
Okay. Anybody else want to add?
Could I just add something? I met with Grover Fugit at CRMC about a week, 10 days ago, and because they've had such a problem getting the program in Cape Cod going, and it looks like they're appealing again, it could be another 2 years. These platforms could be built at Quonset, and that's where they're scheduled to be built, but not only for the 8, but also for the 107 that we have planned. And the federal government has talked to Grover and CRMC and said that if we can get going, we can build these platforms at Quonset that would be used from Massachusetts to Delaware. So you're talking incredible amount of work, a lot of welding. Also, that would open up the possibility for deep water container to be brought in and put on the rail system there, so we could really start to use Quonset the way we envisioned it 10, 15 years ago. I think if we can get this legislation on the fast track and through this year, I think in the next probably 2 months, you're going to see not just the 8, but probably the 107 approved. So we can create clean, renewable energy and also provide a lot of jobs and hopefully fill that gap that we've been missing in our workforce for the last 20 years.
Okay, thank you, Don. Ella?
I was approached by one of our local fishermen, and I promised that I would bring this up tonight. And the question is to the legislators, what will we do to prevent the unemployment for the fishing industry with the new fishing management sector allocation? And I know that Sue has sent a letter to NOAA and that they're acting on this at the federal level. So we're looking for suggestions, what South Kingstown can do. It's my understanding that there's a possibility that our fishing fleets can be shut down, like 50% of them. So this is something that's facing South Kingstown in this economic time. Is there any suggestion from our legislators?
Sue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ella, thanks for bringing this up. Several weeks ago, a fishing community had approached me on this issue, maybe it was even last month. They had requested a resolution to be passed by the House and Senate to go to our federal delegation. At that time, everything was moving on the fast track. I believe the first week of May is when these actual regulations have gone into effect. I didn't think there was enough time for resolution, so I had drafted a letter and had it sent to our federal delegation, asking NOAA to slow down if they would and relook at these regulations that were going to put our fishing fleet, a lot of those folks, out of business. And I understand after the letter was sent to them, our federal delegation sent a letter to NOAA with a lot of the same suggestions that were in there. What I would ask, if the town of South Kingstown, if you feel it's important possibly to send a letter to the federal delegation also, asking and seeking their expedited work on, I guess it's parts of the Magnuson-Stevenson Act that basically are being relooked. And right now the federal delegation has definitely got it on their radar screen, which is very, very good, because this is federal fishing law. And federal delegation has also stepped up and working with legislators from Massachusetts and Maine also into the situation. So whatever you want to do to add your support for the fishing fleet, I'd be glad to get you some more information.
That'd be great. Why don't you forward on that and your
Get
resolution?
a copy of my letter.
Yes,
and-
that'd be great.
I'd be glad to do that.
Send that on to us. Okay. Steve?
The phone call that I received earlier was through the police department. I want to advise everybody that 138 is going to be closed at Glen Rock and Old Escapag Road. It looks as if that's going to be, at this point, the estimate is a 3 to 4 week project. But it means that they're going to be deterring traffic, and that deterring traffic will be in Richmond going down by the airport to bring them out to Route 2 to get them back onto 138. So from a busing issue, we're going to have to deal with it. It was done at supposedly at 9 o'clock tonight that the closure was going to occur. I'm not sure the legislators. Sue, I know you're probably closest to it.
I did get a call, and at first when I got the call, they thought it was the Chapuxet Bridge, and then when I saw the press release, it's the one in Richmond.
Yeah,
but it's definitely going to affect everyone in that area. And it's, thank heavens, the town of South Kingstown reopened the Dugway Bridge. Because after the flood, when we were closed, well, it's reopened. I mean, it's structurally a lot more sound than a lot of the state bridges, what I understand.
A lot of traffic on it, though.
Have you got an engineering degree?
But now with that bridge closed on 138 for probably like 3 to 4 weeks, that's going to cause even more traffic up there. But I want to take the opportunity to really thank South Kingstown Public Works for everything they did. West Kingston was somewhat stranded up there for a while, and I really appreciate the prompt work and around the clock, the highway crew. I know times are tough and cutbacks, but they were there and really opened up the road, and so we could be safe up there. And very much appreciated by everyone.
Yeah. I just hope that we can get DOT to put out the detour maps and to get them on the web and get them to us so we can get them onto our web, because, to do this without the notice, because it's going to affect my, the buses as far as the access, although I'm not sure we've really got anybody going past that point, because it'll be at Glen Rock.
Right.
And it's that section of where the the dam failure occurred, and the culverts under 138 were undermined. So hopefully it'll be a quick repair. I just am concerned that there should have been better notice at this point.
I agree.
To provide both to the legislators as well as to the public, so that we can get some of the that information out. I do bring it up tonight just so that you're aware of it if you do start getting the calls on it.
What I understand is that the flooding really destroyed the abutments underneath there. I guess they finally got around to checking that. What I was going to ask, how the council and the town manager feel about Old Escapag Road. It's a state road. That one where the other bridge let go, that road is closed. And I was wondering if the town, I mean, I'm glad to help with this. The urgency, do you feel there's an urgency to get that section reopened? You know, the one that goes right down to the grist mill, that section, that's
a state highway.
That is a state highway.
Yes.
And I was just hoping, I mean, I'm willing to work with that, if I could have some support from the council also.
Well, we certainly would, you know, from a highway perspective, we certainly want to see Old Escapag Road reopened. There's been really no work done on that.
Right, nothing.
You know. Now, one other one with DOT that's disappointing is Route 1 still has not been repaired since the flooding, just north of Torrey Road. The road pavement is undermined, and the rut that's there, if somebody hits that, it's going to destroy the vehicle or flip it over. We've made contact with DOT, and we still haven't seen those improvements made. So I think you folks traveling on a daily basis, why that's been overlooked, I don't know.
We'll make some calls on that.
Oh, yes, Polly?
Steve, did they give you a date on when it was going to be done, the 138?
138, they've advised us that they were closing it tonight.
Tonight?
Tonight at 9 o'clock, so 15, 20, 40, 35 minutes ago.
I wondered if we were going to get through URI commencement before.
They'll be able to get there.
Well, again, I did not receive any municipal notice on this, so we're going to have to deal with it tomorrow morning. And URI is going to be in the same boat as far as the reroute.
Oh, boy. Oh, yeah. Sue?
I have a new issue.
Okay, Sue's got a new issue. Go right ahead, Sue.
I have a new issue, and it was actually, it was quite an extensive packet, was sent to me by one of our constituents, and it's actually about a school issue, and I was wondering if I could just leave this packet with the clerk, and maybe we could, it has to do, she's very concerned about Wi-Fi in the schools, and she did an extensive research on the public health issues and so forth and so on, and you know, really a compelling letter. I just thought I would pass this information on to you folks as you're considering.
Why don't you give it to Dale, and she can make copies.
Thank you.
Okay. Sue, is that it?
You done with that, Sue?
You look like you're in thought.
Yes, I have another 138 issue.
Okay.
And this goes back before the flooding, but I did have a constituent, one of our constituents, that asked about 138 and Route 2, that lovely intersection that is supposed to be a roundabout someday.
Someday.
And they did do some improvements on Route 2 as far as the turning lanes. But 138 east and west is still an issue. And I was wondering if we could work together on that. How do you feel about that? You know, things go to the State Traffic Commission with the blessing of the council and the I don't know, I'll just put it out there. Be glad to work on this if with your.
I mean, there still is a project area committee that's been reporting to the council on that, and the town transportation committee is involved with it. If people are looking for a change on the roundabout to keep it with the traffic signals, need to get moving on that, because those plans are continuing to move on at a snail's pace, but even after 40 years, the snail is going to get a couple of miles.
Well, I mean, it is an issue of people, they pass on the right, you know, it's the same situation. You have the traffic going east or going west, and people going all over the place,
Yeah.
and there's plenty of
I
rules.
mean, I think that what DOT would have to do is to do the traffic counts again and explain why the roundabout is a preferred feature. And that's what they had presented to the PAC in the past, and the PAC had signed off on it, and the council had endorsed what PAC had recommended. If there's a need to, for further review on it, certainly there still should be time. There were improvements made at that intersection that have increased the flows.
Right, I agree.
My memory is that the DOT was advocating for the roundabout because there's less severe accidents than there is at a traffic signaled intersection. And they were selling it on a safety feature. There may be a greater frequency as far as the number of accidents in a roundabout, but the severity of those accidents would be substantially less. That's what the proposal was.
Okay, so I will pass that back to the constituent. Just, I had explained that there was a lot of work done on it, so committees had done their due diligence along with the council, and that was the plan. So I'll reiterate that.
Yeah, if you send it to us, we can have them talk with get them on the agenda for the traffic commission and see where it goes from there, or to attend the next PAC meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
One other issue
yeah,
of
Dave.
interest, if I may, Madam
Sure.
President.
Mhm.
We all saw the recent reports of the very large gatherings in Narragansett, a lot of the college parties, and we have issues obviously in this town also. A bill that I sponsored passed the House a week or so ago to close what is a rather large loophole in the alcohol statute, where currently, until it goes all the way through, as we all know, it's not legal for a person over 21 to provide alcohol to somebody under 21. But it is not illegal. It is legal. Well, there's no crime for somebody who is under 21 to provide alcohol to somebody who is under 21. And it was a rather lengthy debate on the floor last week, but it did pass, and it's on its way to the Senate. You know, as in a college community like ours, we need to give law enforcement the tools that they need. And you can imagine there could be a multi-keg party out there, or a bunch of college kids, and if the police show up and say, whose kegs are those, and somebody under 21 says they're mine, there's no crime for them providing that. Possessing it maybe, but not providing it to others, and it's when they provide it that we see the tragedies in our community. So I worked with Nancy Devaney actually from the task force and with Matt on that legislation, and it's on its way to the Senate, and hopefully we can get that through to give law enforcement another tool to use in some of these, especially this time of year with the graduations coming and
Proms,
whatnot.
all that, yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you, Dave, for that. Anything else from anybody? No? Okay. Well, if anybody has any questions, this is the time you could come forward if you'd like. Please come forward, state your name for the record.
How you doing? Bob Traeger. This is the biggest meeting I've ever seen here. This is great. I'd like to thank Mr. Lord and Mr. Alfred because I think they pleaded the case for South Kingstown and the education funding quite well.
Can I add to that before? I didn't mean to slight that I saw both John Rashat and Superintendent Stringfellow also in attendance. Dave was also sitting at the table, and so I did see all four of our representatives, and five, I should say, up there. So I didn't give them proper credit earlier. My apologies for that.
There's a few statements I'd like to address that were made over the course of the evening and in the past. I do agree that the funding formula is very important, and that was the main issue discussed tonight. However, I do believe the pension problem is basically blows the doors off that. And if I may, anyone can answer this, but if I may, I'd like to address Mr. Caprio, because at a previous meeting at the town council, he made comments, and you made them again tonight, that it's a difficult choice. And you talked about the plight of the state worker who's about to retire, and I agree, it is a plight. But if we're facing, I don't know what the shortfall is right now in the pension. It's hundreds of millions. It's projected to go approach $1 billion. So if it's doing that, and we don't have the money, Yeah, there's hard choices, but I don't think, when you say there's no magic bullet, I think there is somewhat of a magic bullet. We can't pay those pensions. Now, what can we do? Decide what you can pay. If you only have half the money, all right, someone with 30 years in, he gets a higher percentage. You've got to divvy it up somehow and give him the money. Give it to him, put it in a 401k. I mean, that's been suggested by other leaders in the community, and I buy into that 100%. I mean, when I have my IRA, I mean, the way the state workers run right now, I can speak specifically about teachers. For every dollar they put in, the taxpayer puts in roughly 2, a little more than 2. Well, I mean, you don't get that anywhere else, anywhere that I know of. I mean, I got a 50% match on my first 1,000, and then a 15% match on the next 3,000-4,000. And then I was subject to the pitfalls of the stock market, where the state employee, you know, doesn't have to suffer that. So the thing that bothered me the most was what you didn't say. How this affects the taxpayer, how this affects the average person living here who has to now fund these pensions. So, I mean, until you give some balance to that argument, I don't think you're making any choice. You're siding somewhat with the unions, and I realize if you side against them, that is going to cost you votes. But I don't really care about that because, I mean, if you side with them, I mean, you're going to lose a lot of votes anyway. So as far as the pension goes, you guys have to make some hard choices. And yes, it's not going to be pretty. You're going to have a lot of people calling you. They're going to be ticked off at you. But on the other side, you have people ticked off at you now. So somehow there has to be a middle ground. They're going to have to take a hit. If they don't know that already, well, they're living in a fantasy world. They're counting on you guys to ease their pain at our expense, and you can't do that. You have to balance it. I'm willing to suffer a little, but not $2 for every dollar they put in. That's insane. Senator Sinowski earlier said tonight certain things were paid for it, but it wasn't taxpayer money. Well, federal taxes, I mean, I paid federal taxes too, so when you say it's federal dollars...
I did correct myself. I did say that was
Okay.
taxpayer money.
Okay.
I did correct that.
Well, and Michael Rice earlier said that, you know, he compared teachers to lawyers and doctors. Well, yeah, it is a profession. There's a lot of professions. There's professions that pay nothing. Social workers, I mean, they go to college too. Well, I don't know how you compare teachers to doctors. 4 years of med school, astronomical college bills. Right now, and there's a shortage of primary care doctors. Teachers, on the other hand, with Central Falls, apparently they're all going to get their jobs back. But before they knew that, 700 additional applicants applied for that 100 jobs, in addition to the 100 that got fired. 700. Now, can you imagine if that was a free market system, how much would it cost to educate a kid? 700 people. Where are all these teachers? Who says there's a shortage of teachers? There's lots of teachers. There's a shortage of math and science teachers, but not elementary teachers, gym teachers, nurse teachers. So, I mean, when you compare them to doctors, I mean, I'm having trouble finding a primary care physician. But I think there's teachers lining up, graduating from school, 500, 600 a year out of Rhode Island colleges alone, and there's maybe 100 job openings. So there's no shortage of teachers. And they're certainly making a fair amount of money. After 10 years, the average salary in South Kingstown with a bachelor's degree is like $76,000. And with a master's degree, they're up over 80. And that's not doing any extra stuff, coaching, department chair, whatever. So it's not a bad job. So I do value our teachers, and I think South Kingstown has great teachers. But, I mean, I'm not comparing them to what a doctor has to do to get an education. But anyway, the only question I guess I want answered is, do you have an answer? Are you prepared to fight the fight on the pension? I mean, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves, and you're going to have to get people ticked off at you. You're going to have to say stuff to the unions that they don't want to hear. And the question is, are you willing to do that?
Well, I think we have been doing that. You know, as Don mentioned earlier, for the last 5 years, we've made pension changes. Last year, the most significant one made in a long time. And, you know, to suggest that we're siding with one side or the other, the pension system has, you know, we are currently paying for a lot of the sins of the past. You know, special deals and things that were made in the 80s when I don't think anybody on this panel was in the legislature. And a
Right,
lot,
so I-
and
right,
a lot of
all right.
that has caught up with us. And-
Yes,
And I
but you have
recall
to
what I
realize
said.
those people made a mistake, and you have to tell the rank and file, okay, these people lied to you.
Well-
We didn't lie to you. I never promised my neighbor who can sit on his lounge chair and collect 80% of his salary for the next 30, 40 years. I didn't promise that to him. You're saying you didn't promise to him. So who promised it to him? Somebody who's dead? All right, they're dead. They can't pay you. I can't pay you. So, you know.
We have
I
made-
think it's that simple. I think it's that simple.
Well, we have made significant changes to the pension system where people who may have had 15 or 20 years in and only had 8 or so to go and were guaranteed a certain pension benefit now have to work much longer to get much less. You know, the automatic COLA, we took that out last year. It's now based on an index, 3% being the highest they can get, but it's based on an index now, and that was a significant, for people who are still working, that was a significant change
But
in the
everybody who
pension
flocked
system.
out last year, they got the COLA.
I'm sorry?
Everyone who flocked out last year before that provision was enacted, they're safe
There,
from
there
that.
was a cutoff date, you know, and
Right,
and
and
there were
25
people who
teachers left
retired.
South Kingstown, including the superintendent, who's collecting his pension and who's working part-time in Block Island, so he's collecting his pension, he's working part-time, whatever the law allows, half-time, and he's making more than he made last year, I'm sure. I don't know what his salary is, but that stuff has to stop. I mean, if you don't see that's wrong, if you don't see someone who's 50-something years old collecting an 80% pension and working another state job or town job, and eligible for another pension possibly, or one of my old high school teachers and another one of my sons right now, I'm getting out next year, I'm going to teach in Connecticut or New York, he's going to collect his pension, teach in New York, and then someday get a pension from them. I mean, if you don't take a stand on that, I've got no respect for anyone who can't take a stand on that. That's all I
Well, sir, I mean, with all due respect, we have taken stands on that, and we continue to. There are a lot of proposals out there now. Well, there are a lot of measures out there to suggest the 401K plan. It's a major issue in the governor's race. And, you know, I had several South Kingstown teachers in my office at the State House a few weeks ago. And those discussions came up, and I was surprised that the individual teachers weren't as adamantly opposed to those type of ideas that the union leadership shows, how they are adamantly opposed to that. But, you know, all those suggestions are in play. But again, there is a fairness issue. And this is what I was saying a few weeks ago, I think that you referenced in your question. It's not only fairness to those who may have been working for a few decades, but it's fairness to yourself, to the taxpayers who are supporting it. And there is a significant deficit right now in the pension system that we have to deal with. And one side, one decision or the other, neither extreme of those decisions are fair to most people. You know, if somebody dedicated, like I said, 25 years of their life to a profession, and then a group of people just took their whole future away from them, what they had been counting on over 25 years of employment, you know, I'm not sure that everybody in our community would want to do that to anybody, whether they're a union member or whether they're in the private industry. We can't control all the economic forces in the world. And, you know, I'm like you. I have my own 401K, and it took a significant hit over the last several years. But, you know, we are dealing with that, you know, significant deficit in the pension system. And, you know, the magic bullet of the 401K, again, it has consequences that I'm not sure everybody understands, because to fund the pensions for the people that are already collecting, if we were to switch everybody to the 401K immediately, we would have to come up with hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to keep the current system operating until all those people that are collecting now, you know, run the string, so to speak. So to switch it now is actually going to be more costly than not switching it, to try to have both systems surviving at the same time. So that, you know, there's a lot of numbers floating around about what that may be, but certainly the person who's been collecting for 10 years, I'm not sure if we could even change it on that person if we wanted to. I don't know if that would survive a court challenge as a property right. So to pay all the people that are currently retired for what their contract is for the rest of their life. And to now start a new system is going to take a significant amount of investment, because if you start a new system, the contributions are not going into the old system to pay those who are already retired and collecting. So there would be a significant investment needed to keep both of those going at the same time. That's the type of information that we're presented with, and the factors that we're presented with when we make these decisions.
So you're saying right now that you don't know if the legislature has the authority to affect current retirees? You don't know?
My understanding is that we can't.
No.
That's a fact, you can't?
No, you can't. You can't go back if somebody's, somebody's.
You can't go back on what?
I don't think that you could go back if somebody's been collecting their pension been retired for 30 years and.
Well, the
go
federal
into-
government did it with Social Security.
Well, I think you'd have some.
I'm saying they did. You never used to be taxed. I'm just saying that.
My understanding is
My
around the
understanding is
country,
that
the
when you
case.
don't have money, I mean, I realize there's legalities, but when you don't have money,
I don't think we're going to
you
answer it
stop
here tonight.
spending.
I don't think we're going to answer
Right.
it here
But-
tonight.
but
I do appreciate
You brought
your
it to the
comments.
table, and we appreciate that, Mr. Traeger, okay? So I think we'll move on to somebody, if anybody else has any other questions. Please state your name for the record.
Roland Benjamin. I've got a few things here, but specifically, Senator Sosnowski, you mentioned some appreciation to the town council and maybe the school committee as well. When you have a clear resolution in front of you, it gives you guidance on how at least so that you know how the town feels, how you should be directing some of your activities. Not necessarily as an instruction on how you're required to vote, of course, but at least so that you know something from your constituency. I assume that's probably common across the delegation. I would say that's helpful rather than hurtful. We're dealing with quite a few issues now with the funding of our schools. Specifically, we're looking at this funding formula that's going to have an impact. Things like the motor vehicle impact from the state aid, COLA reforms that have been discussed and may or may not materialize for all the same reasons you just talked about, some group home aid. All of these have been cited as, at least as a community member here and someone who's considered getting involved at a higher level than a community member. These are all significant issues. Have you been given explicit direction and opinion on each one of these specific issues in the form of resolutions that give you that guidance, or is this type of forum about the only public guidance you're getting? And specifically, if there's not specific resolutions out there, is there something that we can do in the different types of resolutions that we can push forward to?
Thank you for your comments. On most of the issues that you brought up, we have received communications, if not a resolution, communications from the council and the town manager. And also, the town of South Kingstown is also represented on many items by the League of Cities and Towns. They have a lobbyist. All the towns pay dues. I believe you pay dues to belong to the League of Cities and Towns. They have representation there all the time, and those individuals come forward and say how many town councils are in favor or opposed to certain pieces of legislation. And that goes on fairly frequently. They have the lobbyists there at just about every meeting, committee, whether it's finance or corporations, things that pertain to cities and towns. And it also, there's a registered paid lobbyist from the school committees, Association of School Committees, who is very vocal and is in constant contact with the legislators on issues of mutual concern of the town. And many times I will ask the lobbyist, as he talked to, is he representing South Kingston? I'll say this on the record. Are you representing, have you contacted the town of South Kingstown on this issue? And they will either say yes or no, and then if I
If he says that he has not heard from the town of South Kingstown, then I contact the town to find out their standing on an issue. And that goes on fairly frequently in the Senate. I believe it does in the House, too, where these matters are very important. Education, taxation, all those issues are very important. So we do have a pretty good communication from the town council.
But in the form of formal votes on resolutions, I
would
heard
say-
something on binding arbitration that was
Yes, that was very good.
forwarded.
I was glad to hear that,
and
because
it-
last year I was a co-sponsor of that legislation, which was, as explained to me, it was going to be a cost-saving measure, and then when I heard from the council, they felt it was not going to be a cost-saving measure. It's very important, and it's also, when I go into a committee debate or on the floor debate, to have a town council or a school committee resolution backing up what I'm saying is very, very important, and it carries a lot of weight.
And that's my question. Are there any of these that you have in your files for these funding formulas right now?
We just passed one up,
Yes.
yes.
We have one from the
Which-
school committee and from the town council.
On which issues?
Funding formula?
On the commissioner's formula?
Yes.
And also arbitration.
As far as the funding formula goes, which aspects of it are covered in that resolution?
There's very detailed critiquing the commissioner's proposal
Mhm.
for funding formula.
And what about delays on implementation or anything that could buy us time with respect to the school? Has there been any discussion on that? I heard some of it.
There has
I
been
came in
discussion.
late.
There's been discussion on it.
There's been discussion, but not a formal resolution. But I will say that this council has probably given me and my colleagues more resolutions and more direction than other councils had previous years. And I think it's because we're in these dire economic times that they understand how important it is to get their word to the legislature.
There's resolutions, and there's also phone calls
Yeah,
that go
phone
back and
call.
forth.
Lots of communication.
Or meeting at bridges that are being repaired.
Oh,
And
yes.
having, having discussion, so it's, excuse me, it has happened. I've called all of our representatives, I've spoken with them.
Many times.
As the council chair, that's really kind of my job to, there's something that's really, that we kind of bring forward.
I appreciate that, too.
So I have had conversations with all of.
From a
Kevin?
school committee
Sorry.
side, sometimes it depends on the
Sorry, I missed
sequencing
you
of the
again.
meetings, but, if I do get a notification from the Rhode Island Association of School Committees on certain pieces of legislation, and I'll shoot out quick emails. I'll admit I tend to send them to Sue and Mike just because they're quicker on my BlackBerry, because a lot of times I'm traveling. But we try to send notes as soon as we can and go back, and I know Mike and I talk here and there. It just depends. If we can do a formal resolution, then we want to make sure we get it right, and that may be 3 weeks. Well, some of these, we don't have 3 weeks to wait, so we'll do it faster. So it just depends on the situation. But I think the communication between the town council, the school committee, and the representatives has been excellent in my couple of years.
Specifically, though, these funding formula issues have been here since February, late February into March, I think. These were contingency plans that were designed months and months ago, so.
And we've passed a resolution.
I also have to say, I also will sit with the, oh jeez, my mind just went blank. Yes, excuse me, the Washington County Regional Planning Council, and I've actually had discussions with the other communities, and with the other communities and talking to their representatives about the funding formula being affected, and some of the information that, Mr. Alford has brought forward right from the beginning about the double whammy that we were kind of picking up from the free and reduced lunch. So, I mean, this is something that it's not even just working here with our representatives, it's working with the other community, the town chairs from the Washington County Regional Planning and going on from their legislators, because obviously there's more power in numbers. And as soon as we get more information, we kind of share it with each other, and it goes from there. So it's not even at this level, it's all of the Washington County groups. So I think Donna was next, and then Scott. Oh, you didn't want to go down?
I just want to say that I represent 4 towns, and I really value the input from South Kingston, especially the information I got from Steve on the funding formula and the analysis of it. It's superb. I mean, I can't imagine getting all of that done in that amount of time and comparing it. But also, we also have many constituents that email us and call. So that's another avenue of communication that is important, and so we're here, we're listening, and you do a good job of it.
Thank you, Donna. Scott?
And I think the question you raised is an important one. One aspect of Kevin's response is that the resolution process works quite well in a static environment. But we've had a couple of times where we prepared resolutions, and by the time they got before the school committee, the bills that were being considered had been altered. And so keeping up in that way doesn't work always with resolutions. The school committee actually has created the role of liaison to the State Association of School Committees. It's a role that I play out. And in an average week, I'm in touch with the executive director of the State Association 2 to 3 times, and I'm getting emails from him almost daily during the spring semester about both hearings and changes in legislation. South Kingstown is among the most active of the communities impacting the positions taken by the State Association. And as suggested, our executive director is clear and forceful in his advocacy for school committee positions.
All right, Mike.
I'd like to actually amplify that. Because of the sort of the rapid pace at which a number of bills are being amended and the like, I at least have been in contact with members of the school committee via email an awful lot. The second thing I want to point out is that in terms of our representation by our town authorities, Mr. Alfred's analysis of the funding formula is, and its presentation up in the state, has and will do us well. And I'll tell you why, is that very frequently among a lot of policy makers up in the state, numbers freak them out. Oftentimes people will, when it comes to numbers, a lot of people will just go along with what they're told. And having someone within our town staff that actually gets under the hood, tries to understand the meaning of each and every one of those numbers, actually does us and the entire state well, because it basically, as in the scene of The Wizard of Oz, don't mind that man behind the curtain. Well, if we start to pull back the curtain, a lot more sort of truth, and once that comes out, it does us well.
Well, I think I would agree that we're all pretty comfortable with Steve Alfred's management, along with Alan's and Kristen's and John's and everything. Some of us think they might hold on a little too tightly to some of our dollars, but that's a local issue, I guess.
Some, but not all.
Yeah.
Not me.
Just wait.
Yeah. I appreciate those comments, and I just wanted to bring up those things. And that's it. Let everybody else speak. So.
Okay, thank you, Roll. Anybody else, please come forward and state your name for the record.
Jonathan Daly LaBelle. The first item, I've got 3 items I'd like to cover, and I don't think I need to go on too long. But the first item, I would ask my town council members, at one of the next regular meetings, to maybe talk about the protocol of a work session, because a lot of people left right after the third item on the agenda was over, which is really what people were keyed into, is the funding formula, budget, this year's budget, next year's budget. And so the comment was opened up, we'll take community comment if the council president, at the town council president's discretion. So right after that item was done, probably 6, 8, 10 people that may be interested and may have wanted to speak left. And I'm not saying that the other items that came up, the sources of energy, the impacts on fisheries, status of the roads, and the alcohol, I don't want to say that those are not important issues, so I hope that when I sit down, I don't hear that, well, he thinks that those issues aren't important. I just don't think that they were the key items for tonight, and I think that that was pretty clear. Anybody that looks at the agenda, it says funding formula, budget, next year's budget, then other matters of interest and concern. So I guess when the work session is set, I hope that the town council will have this discussion, whether or not that's appropriate, because I do hear the town council members discuss time and again that they would like to see more public participation, and when the public feels like they're excluded from the discussion, that's what discourages public participation. Yeah, I mean, Mr. Alfred, number two, Mr. Alfred he's unbelievable. I mean, that's been pretty clear to everybody for a long time. The note that I made here was just, and I was going to say he's got a good guy to his right. And I've always wondered about that. I've always wondered, Those guys are really smart. Did Gist I'm just wondering if Gist testified up at the State House? She did.
For a long time.
Okay.
It was the beginning of the forum.
Okay, thank you. When she came down to Narragansett, she had made the statement that the funding formula is a work in progress. It needs to go through an open and transparent governmental process. Definitely could change. Did she make that type of a statement at the State House, would you say?
Both she and the chairman made that type of a statement. The concern is the time period in which you'd have to do the tweaking to be effective in terms of dealing with the formula. And I think that was very evident with everybody that spoke that day.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's positive that she takes that stance, and it may be that the formula can be passed and then still altered, or maybe it can't. Maybe once it's passed, then it's it. I mean, I think once a law becomes a law, it's a law, but then laws are made to be altered and changed. So I think that there's really a lot of power there, and I'm going to assume that the commissioner is a very fair person, because that's what I've heard her say. And she said that if there are things brought forward that are legitimate concerns, points of concern that may not be fair in an analysis, that she would really look at it and she would weigh in on it and advocate to correct it. So I thought that was a really valuable thing to hear, and I'm glad to hear that she spoke about it again. In the future, things can change. So I guess the last point I would make is I would really advocate to our school committee. What I'm hearing is a little bit of good budget news from the state, and I know it's small amounts, but you got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere. Last year we were losing a month as a country 700,000 jobs. And right now we just added 200,000 or 300,000. That's not a lot. And when you've lost a few million, you say, well, what's a few 100,000? But the trend has to start somewhere. So I think that's encouraging, and I'm glad to hear that brought forward. So I would advocate to the school committee that with some of the news that I'm hearing, that things are not set in stone. Our commissioner's saying that. The budget chairman is saying that. And our local legislators, what I'm hearing from them is they're willing to fight for us. And I really appreciate that. I really do. And I hope that our school committee will let you fight for us, because I think if they make these drastic changes without even knowing if the drastic changes are needed, they're really undercutting your ability to make hard work, to make fruit from your labor. Because you're really saying, you've heard them say time and again, I know I have, and I'm sure you have, none of the changes that they're talking about are a benefit to our school system. We have a high-performing school district. We're awesome. Let's be honest. So they don't really want to make changes. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I hear meeting after meeting. They don't want to make these changes. It's not a benefit. And so now I'm hearing from the state, our legislators, these drastic pieces that are coming our way may not be drastic. It may be, the implementation may be pushed off a year. Mr. Alfred and Mr. Lord are brilliant, as has been talked about. They have the data that they've come forward is unbelievable. So, and then numbers, you know, up at the state, you start saying, wait a minute, whoa, there's some logic there. We can't fight that. There's too much logic. So I think there's so many tremendous pieces in play that to see any kind of drastic thing, these types of changes to a school system, closing a school, and I've heard everybody say how much they love our neighborhood schools. Wakefield has kind of been identified for whatever reason, so then it's been professed, you know, we love Wakefield School. I think with all these pieces up in the air, I would think that that would kind of cool the need to make those changes. Let our legislators fight for us. I so appreciate that. And I think that the community, this whole community appreciates that you're going to go to bat for us. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Teresa Tanzi, and I am wondering if there's any legislation that's been proposed to ensure that the town council and the school committee will have the state budget numbers well in advance of having to make the decisions regarding their options, their operational options. If there's anything proposed or rumored to change that schedule, that calendar around.
Senator Walter Felag had sponsored legislation that would enable cities and towns to change their fiscal year and more coordinated with the state budget. And that, I believe that passed the Senate committee. I don't know if there's any House legislation, companion legislation, but we had heard from different cities and towns that, you know, they have to play this waiting game all the time, and a lot of them wanted to change. Don't necessarily want to change their fiscal year, but this would give them like another 90 days, give the towns another 90 days for their budget situation, so if they wanted to change. Some don't want to change, some do.
Right.
And technically, what we do have is essentially in statute the governor's proposed budget. So if towns do choose to base their budget on the governor's budget, they have that option. It may be, you know, depending on who the governor is, maybe more optimistic or less optimistic on how it would be in terms of the budgeting process, but at least there's that starting point.
Okay. And then on a different note, there have been two pieces of legislation introduced by Representatives Pacheco and Ruggiero that would increase the transparency of voting records of our legislators. And this would put all of the votes that are taken both in committee and on the floor online. And in fact, there's a hearing tomorrow in House Finance Committee for at least Representative Pacheco's bill. It's House 7078. Do you, each of our legislators here tonight, support that? And would you be willing to ask leadership to get a vote on that on the floor? I think it's really important. We are in the age of, you know, information. At the state that we're in now, we should really have that access to those votes as it stands. Now, if I wanted to see the way one of my legislators voted on a bill, I would have to know first and foremost the date that it was voted on. Once I found out the date, I would then have to scroll down and try to find it according to the name. It's a very convoluted way to find out how people who represent us are voting. So I'm just wondering if any of you would support it or be willing to speak to the speaker or leadership to get a hearing for it.
Anybody? Donna?
Yes, I do support that, and in fact, in the past have co-sponsored legislation to promote greater transparency, not only with dealing with the voting records, but also dealing with open record, public records, and cutting down the amount of time that is wasted while people try to get these records. So I'm all for people having access to all the information they need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
I don't believe, well, if it comes over to the Senate, I'd be more than happy to support that bill, and serving on the Government Oversight Committee, more for more open government. I know I guess it's a lot easier to find out how we vote on the Senate floor and on the House floor, but I think it's the committee votes. that
It's
seem
actually
to be
quite
more-
difficult for either. Yeah, it is. It definitely is.
You know, I thought it was a lot easier for people because I'm always there and I'm always very conscious how I vote, but I'm all
Right.
for it. You know, it sounds great.
Thank you. Would you be willing to sponsor something on the Senate side? Thank you. Representative Rice?
I don't mind anybody having ready access to how I vote at all. And in fact, if anybody wanted to find out how I voted, short of those things, all they have to do is drop me an email or send me a line and ask me how I voted. I don't mind talking about that at all.
Thank you. Representative Caprio?
Good evening, Ms. Tansey. And also, everybody who's still here, I mean, it's past 10 o'clock now, so we've all had a long night. Transparency is, the State House has come a long way in the recent past in transparency. As you know, just a short few years ago, there was very little online at all about not only what happened in the legislature, but what happened in the entire State House. You almost had to be an investigative reporter to find out very basic data as to what was going on at the State House until very recently. The legislature has come a long way. All of the Finance Committee meetings are televised live and replayed so that the general public can see not only what's being debated, but see who's testifying and get to listen to all the questions and have that information available. All of the bills that we introduce are available online almost immediately. Within a day after they're introduced, they're online. And you can search them by name, you can search them by prime sponsor, you can search them by other sponsors, if they're not the prime sponsor but another sponsor. You can search them by bill number. It's all available to the public.
But not the actual votes.
Well, it is available, and that's the next step. And also, not only the legislature, but other state offices now are doing a lot to provide more transparency. The Treasurer's Office, for example, is probably the most transparent office in state government, where every dollar they spend is online in real time as it's spent. And to open up transparency, I don't think any legislator on this panel or any legislature at the state or anybody at the State House would have an issue with that. We're up there making the votes. We're elected to do that, and we understand our votes are what people expect of us.
Absolutely.
So to have access to them, I don't see anybody having a problem with that.
Thank you. It is a bipartisan bill, so I would love to just have the support of the legislators, asking leadership for it. That would be great. And I didn't want to leave you out, Representative Lally. I saw you.
Yeah, it has my support. I think you mentioned that it was in finance.
Oddly enough, it is.
Well-
There's a hearing tomorrow in House Finance.
Probably because it has a fiscal note attached to it, because someone, usually if it's going to require extra reporting, someone's going to have to enter the data, so.
Right, and it was through the Secretary of State's office that it's being proposed, that management.
Do you plan to go up and testify?
Pardon?
Do you plan to go up and testify?
Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to go tomorrow. However, it is definitely something that I'm interested in.
Well, we'll be there, and maybe we'll place on the record that you're in favor of it.
Please, yeah.
Okay.
It might save you some time when you're tracking the bills. If you know the bill, the sponsor, and then you get the bill number, you can scroll down as to what date it was voted on the floor, and then you've got a cross-reference to the House Journal, and then see how they voted. I know it can be a lot easier, but that was one way where you can, find out how anybody voted on any bill. But you're right. In the committees, they're all done by hand. It's all done by carbon paper, and it's because one goes to one goes on the file, another goes up to.
Secretary of State.
Yeah, where'd it go? There's three different places it goes to, but that's the way it's been done. So it's reported out of committee, and the votes are available. But you're right, it's not the easiest thing to track. So
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly, and thank you for that. I appreciate it, each and every one of you. Thanks.
Sir, please come up and state your name for the record.
Mike Chappell. I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. Representative Caprio, actually, 3.5 hours would be a short meeting, to be honest with you. I think we're going to actually be out of here by 10:30, which is a rarity. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. And I like some of the things I heard tonight. I'm not going to go off on what each one is, but one of them that I did hear was that everyone's communicating with each other by looks of it. And we're in crunch time, so really it's important that everyone here does talk to everybody else. The reps, with the town council, school committee, Mr. Alfred, Mr. Lord. We have 8 days, and there's a vote. And we all know what's at stake with this vote. There are many options that are available. There are some that have been brought up to the forefront. What I'm looking for is just a simple request. It doesn't require an answer tonight. I actually don't want an answer. I just want people to go home and think about this. With the communication that I've heard tonight about the fact that perhaps the first week in June, there could be numbers available that could aid the town council and more importantly aid the school committee in their decision. I'd like the school committee just to think it over for the next few days. Can we still make these decisions we need to make in 3 weeks as opposed to 4? I understand that time is of the essence, that you have to crunch numbers. I listened very intently back there to everything that goes into planning job fairs and everything else. I get it. Can it be done in 3 weeks? Does it mean maybe an extra night sitting around the table, hashing it all out with the superintendent? Perhaps. Is it worth it to the 3,000 plus children in this community? I think it is. I have 3. And, you know, I want to know where they're going to go. I'm concerned about their education. I moved to this town from Charlestown for the education. And I think it's important that we consider, can it be done in 3 weeks as opposed to 4? And I bet it probably can be done. Okay, everyone up here is a professional. You've been on the committee for a while. Dr. Stringfellow has been in her job position for many years. I think if you're pressed, you could do it. I really do. So that's my request, is that you just go home tonight and think about it. Can it be done in 3 weeks as opposed to 4? And let's see what our representatives are going to give us for good news. I heard the word draconian probably 24 times tonight. I'm going to go home and teach my kids that tomorrow, what it means, and hope that they don't have to know exactly how to experience it in this district. So thank you for your time tonight, everybody. And again, I just ask that you think about, can it be done in 3 weeks as opposed to 4, and give our representatives some time to maybe get some good news here. With that, I'm going that way. I have to be at work tomorrow. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, Steve?
Kathy, could I just make one comment? The suggestion was made that the General Assembly was looking at a bill that would provide cities and towns with the legislation I saw was to change fiscal years to an October 1 date. And I want to make it clear, that would be something that I would be strongly opposed to. One, you would create 1 year that would be a 15-month year. Many towns that are financially strapped would end up borrowing dollars for that quarter. Understand that we maintain records on a month-to-month basis as to where our revenues are, where they were prior years, where they were 5 years back, so that we can do revenue estimations. If we change the period of time in which the money is coming in, we lose the documentation for us to be able to forecast whether we need to adjust budgets down or whether we need to change things from month to month. It makes little sense to me to say that we're going to change things to an October 1 start date because the General Assembly is not able to get its job done within a timely period. So please, don't think for a second, if Wally Felag thinks that that's a great idea for Warren, so be it. I grew up with Wally. And, but don't think that we're going to sign on to something like that. And hopefully people will ask the municipal governments whether they think that's a viable proposal. Because I don't think anybody's really asked the cities and towns whether they think that's appropriate.
Yeah. Funny. And it is enabling legislation. It's not something that the towns would have to do. It was giving them the option. And there was, there were several towns that were opposed to it for a lot of different reasons. Some of, like you said, you know, like you're set up a certain way. But
That would create havoc.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
See, this is communication,
Yes.
it's a good thing, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that, please state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Dale Osberg. Just wanted to make a comment about the voting records. An easy place to find that is on rivotes.org.
Yeah,
So if you
they're
go
on
there,
the
check that
websites.
out. And also, if you want to see how the state and municipalities are spending money, you can go to ridata.org. So.
All right, thank you. That was very helpful. All right, anybody else? Okay.
Didn't cost the state
Dale,
any money
Dale
to do that.
Osberg? He's full of fun facts. All right, we appreciate that. What was his name? Dale Osberg. Is that a wave to you?
Oh, no, it was,
go
I didn't
ahead.
know if someone else, if not.
Is there anybody else? Dale Osberg? Jim, before I choke you.
There's no one else in the audience. Just quickly here on this pension issue. If you've been reading the papers, hopefully you're as nervous as I am, and I want to at least say some good things about the General Assembly. They have, in fact, since 2005, the taxpayers' billed of state pensions across the board have dropped from about $390 million to about $330 million in the current year, a $60 million savings. So kudos on that, even though I think you all know I don't think that goes far enough. But now let me give you the other side of that equation. The consultant to the State Retirement Board has suggested the expected rate of return, rather than being 8 1/4, 7 3/4 might have to be the target. That has been calculated at $60 million. That's a wipeout. You heard Steve Alford earlier talk about the union suit for those pension changes that have taken place since 2005. $60 million I've already talked about. We're talking about $120 million, folks. That is serious money. And just to correct some numbers earlier, the last from the Treasurer's Office, we're $4.3 billion unfunded. Municipalities are $2 billion unfunded, and no one can calculate the post-healthcare retirement costs, but they're also in the billions. So this is very important. The pension issue, outside of schools, safety net, the pension issues are the largest dollar amounts the General Assembly has to look at. This is serious. We've got to tackle this. And believe me, I get yelled at like you guys do on both sides of this equation. But I also know there's a way to ladder this down. Maybe we have enough money in there that we could, set it aside for those that are retired, ladder it down, combinations of 403Bs like professors at the university has, IRA-directed accounts. There's a way to get to that, but it has to be done. The money is not there. People are living longer. Fewer workers supporting this. It's just too obvious that this is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We've got to tackle this year and next. But these other two possible changes with the expected rate of return and the suit on this, it could be catastrophic because $120 million there comes right out. That's serious money. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Anybody else? So that our meeting is concluded. 10:20, and I want to thank you all for coming.